You mean he's going to eat her? No, Goku, he's not.
Well, he might still eat her, just not in the way you're thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tournament Saga of the Dragon Ball Retrospective. This saga picks up right where the last saga left off, with Goku flying on the flying Nimbus towards Master Roshi's place. He returns to his home to pack some stuff. Fun fact, this is actually the last time that Goku's original home is ever seen in the manga. In fact, Goku won't really have a home at all for the remainder of his childhood. He'll be living with Master Roshi for this saga. After that, he starts adventuring around the world in search of his 4-star Dragon Ball, followed by 3 years of traveling the world on foot in preparation for the next tournament. And as soon as that tournament is wrapped up, something else will immediately happen that commands Goku's immediate and full attention, and once that crisis is resolved, he'll make a promise to someone else to stay with that person for the next 3 years, after which he'll have grown up. It's only after he grows up that there's actually an organic point in the story for him to even need to return to his home. But even then, this one-room shack is never seen again, at least not in the manga. The anime will portray Goku's adult home as an extension of this one-room shack, but that's only anime filler. When Goku's adult home does finally get shown in the manga, his original one-room shack is clearly nowhere to be seen. So get a good look at this house while you still have the chance. Goku realizes he's hungry, but he instantly assumes that Roshi will have food. But I have to wonder why he doesn't just catch his own food. He certainly would have done that just a few days earlier in universe. What, did the few days he spent with Bulma, Oolong, and Yamcha suddenly make him lose his taste for wild game to the point where he no longer sees it as viable food? It feels like Toriyama had completely forgotten the kind of character that he originally wrote Goku to be. Here's Goku out in the middle of nowhere where he suddenly finds himself wanting food, but there's no food for miles. Akira, did you forget that this is Goku's home? You're writing Goku to wonder where he's supposed to get food all the way out here in the wilderness? Well, how the fuck did he get food before he met Bulma? Dumbass. Anyway, Yamcha, Bulma, Oolong, and Puar, who I'm just going to call Bulma and Company for short, crashed their plane in the middle of the jungle. That plane was apparently Yamcha's last dino cap, so now they're forced to hoof it. However, as they gather themselves, someone else can be seen running through the jungle. He kicks down a few trees. For what purpose, I have no idea. I mean, you would think he was going to make a boat out of those trees, like we see later in the episode, but halfway through the episode, we see this guy again sprinting through the desert, and the wood he collected is nowhere to be found. So he just kicked some trees down for absolutely no reason at all. Returning to Goku, we see him on the flying Nimbus, and he decides to take what he refers to as a shortcut. How does he know it's a shortcut? It's way too high for him to have reached it without the flying Nimbus, so it's not like he's explored that section of the mountain before. Well, anyway, he walks in on Master Roshi while he's watching aerobics videos as if they were porn. This is basically the frothy mugs of water trope in television where adult things such as alcohol are rebranded into something banal, even though the effects of the thing are not glossed over. Here, it's clear that Roshi, in-universe, is supposed to be watching porn. But since Dragon Ball is a kids' show, even despite all the imitable violence, which is actually considered kid-friendly by Japanese standards, they have to replace it with something else. But another aspect of the frothy mugs of water trope is that the effects of the thing on the person consuming it are the same as if it were the real thing. So a person who drinks actual frothy mugs of water will still get drunk. since they're still supposed to be drinking beer. Here, Roshi is watching aerobics workout tapes, but he's still mesmerized and getting horny, the same as if he's watching porn. Anyway, just as Goku predicts, Roshi invites Goku to eat some of his food. He then proceeds to eat all of his food. But what really confuses me is the fact that Goku claims he's never heard of a refrigerator, yet when he searches for the food, he gets it right on the first try. Is it just me, or is Toriyama really inconsistent about Goku's naivety? Well, not really, it's just that at this stage, Toriyama kinda sucks at writing cohesive and coherent stories. Now, before anyone has a heart attack, let me actually explain myself. It is no secret that Dragon Ball Z is far and away more popular than OG Dragon Ball. Nobody in their right mind would deny that. Even if you personally prefer OG Dragon Ball over Dragon Ball Z, you cannot deny the cast iron objective fact that such an opinion puts you definitively in the minority. But has anyone ever stopped to consider exactly why Z is so much more popular than OG? Some may argue that's because there's way more action in Z than in OG, but that's not true at all. Starting with this saga, every saga for the rest of the series is going to be extremely fight-centric. It's really just the Pilaf saga that isn't fight-centric. In my personal opinion, it's because Akira Toriyama, after several years of experience in writing a series that demanded a cohesive story with grounded characters, finally got enough experience and practice starting around the Saiyan saga to actually get good at telling stories rather than just telling jokes. Bear in mind that, at this point, we are currently on chapter 24 of the Dragon Ball manga. Since each chapter is released weekly, that means that Toriyama has been writing Dragon Ball for only 6 months up to this point. Akira Toriyama, by his own admission, makes up a majority of the stories he tells as he goes along. It's not quite whose line is it anyway levels of improv, but he certainly didn't plan the story out well in advance. Even if, as I speculated last time, Toriyama might have decided to make Goku an alien as early as the second episode of the anime, he most likely didn't think to himself that the prince of that alien race was going to be called Vegeta, and that character was going to be an arrogant, self-centered blowhard. Toriyama makes up 90% of the story in the moment, and that is not controversial. He admitted to it himself. Prior to Dragon Ball, Toriyama was most famous in Japan for writing a series called Dr. Slump. Dr. Slump, however, was not story or character focused, nor did it even try to be. Oh, it had a story, and it had a cast of characters, but they are far from the focus. The focus is the jokes. The characters are largely character versions of Japanese and American pop culture. For example, Arale is a parody of Pinocchio, and so their traits are cranked up to 11 in order to make them funny rather than grounded or relatable. Meanwhile, the story, what little there was, served only as very loose connective tissue to link the jokes together. If you go and read the manga, it's clear that Toriyama was never concerned with where the characters were going to be 10 chapters in the future. Chapter by chapter, page by page, even panel by panel, Toriyama was less concerned with how to move the story forward and more concerned with what was the funniest thing to have the characters do in that moment. To give you an idea of how that worked using an example that most English-speaking audiences will immediately understand, look at the Looney Tunes, especially the original shorts from the 40s and 50s. Sure, Bugs, Daffy, and Elmer all had distinct personalities, but they were highly exaggerated and unrealistic ones. Meanwhile, the actual plot of each short was borderline non-existent. Instead of the characters wanting something, having obstacles in their way to achieving what they want, and having to learn lessons and grow as characters in order to overcome those obstacles and achieve their goals, it's pretty obvious that the writers are primarily concerned with, what's the funniest way we can have Daffy get shot in the face? Dr. Slump was an ever so slightly more interconnected version of that. Each new chapter would technically pick up where the last chapter left off, unlike Looney Tunes or most comic strips in the Sunday newspaper, where each new installment existed in their own vacuum, completely independent of any past or future installments. But aside from that, Toriyama had about as much reverence for actual storytelling as the original Looney Tunes writers did. However, that was Dr. Slump. This is Dragon Ball. So what does all of that have to do with what we have here in front of us? Well, unlike Dr. Slump, Dragon Ball actually seeks to tell a story. It still wants to make us laugh, but unlike Dr. Slump before it, Toriyama actually seems to be trying to tell a story. Roshi offered to train Goku in Chapter 15 of the manga, and here we are in Chapter 24, finally paying off a plot thread that was set up 9 chapters in advance. While that sounds like nothing compared to the foreshadowing that happens in Z, like how Vegeta mentions the Super Saiyan 29 episodes and 40 manga chapters before Goku actually achieves the form, compared to how he usually wrote Dr. Slump, this is the largest amount of time in between setup and payoff that he has ever done up to this point in his career. However, it's clear that, at this point in the series, Toriyama is not very experienced or skilled in this specific style of writing, as evidenced by how inconsistently he writes Goku's naivety. In Dr. Slump, Arale was a robot who was created in the first manga chapter. This meant that she had no life experience to speak of, and so it was excusable when she would do one thing and then do something incompatible with it just 10 seconds later. By contrast, Goku does have life experience, and so when he finds himself hungry and assuming Roshi will feed him, when he's literally surrounded by wild game he could just catch for himself? That is far more jarring because it's inconsistent with Goku's character. A character that Goku actually has that Arale doesn't. And when Goku wonders what a refrigerator is, but then gets it right on the first try, we are left wondering why he doesn't already know what a refrigerator is due to his experience in Oolong's camper. Because he actually has experience to draw from, but Arale doesn't. In the previous saga, when I complained that there was no good reason why Goku would know that flowers are supposed to be romantic, I was able to make assumptions about Goku's backstory because he actually has a backstory to make assumptions about, but Arale doesn't. By the time Z rolls around, Toriyama will have gotten significantly better at telling plot-focused stories and actually developing characters. While the actual specifics of each story will usually be made up as he goes along, it's clear that he has an outline of high points he wants to hit with his stories, an actual character growth that he wants his characters to undergo. This, in my opinion, is the main reason why Z is so much more popular than OG. So anyway, we cut briefly to Bulma and company hoofing it through the desert. You know, for those who don't think that Bulma and Yamcha are a great couple, this right here has to be their absolute cutest moment together.
Oh,
Yeah, let's change that bandage.
Thank you, Yamcha.
They run into the bald guy from before, and as I mentioned, the wood he collected earlier is nowhere to be seen. Switching back to Roshi and Goku, it turns out that even though Roshi literally offered to train Goku, he still requires tribute before he'll do it. Specifically, he demands a girlfriend, so Goku goes out and finds a woman who's a bodybuilder. I assume Goku believed Roshi would like this girl because she's clearly into getting strong, as evidenced by the dumbbells she's carrying. So maybe this is one of the few times that there was actually some thought put into the joke. The second woman Goku brings back is more conventionally attractive. Goku asks if this girl is Roshi's type. And while Goku does use the word type correctly here, I once again have to put on my nerd hat and complain that this is inconsistent with Goku's supposed naivety. You're honestly telling me that Gohan taught Goku what it means for a girl to be someone's type, but didn't teach him how to actually be polite around girls first? Anyway, it turns out that this woman is actually a mermaid. So Roshi demands a fully human woman who's conventionally attractive instead. He then thinks to himself that the do-gooder turtle is on vacation, so he has to make the most of the opportunity. Damn, bro! The guy just got back home a few days ago after being lost for an entire year, and he just up and takes a vacation? Clearly that turtle wasn't nearly as lost and worried as he claimed he was, so maybe Goku wasn't so altruistic after all. Or maybe series author Akira Toriyama is just a complete dumbass. Anyway, before Goku can embark a third time, the bald guy from before shows up at Roshi's island. So, this guy's name. Oh boy, this guy's name in English is the subject of quite a bit of controversy. For those of you who didn't watch the introduction video to this series primarily covers the Funimation dub of the TV show, with references to the original Japanese version sprinkled in from time to time when it's necessary to provide context. This guy's English name, however, is especially controversial. In Japanese, this guy's name is this. But unless you speak Japanese, this is probably just chicken scratch for you. Transliterating names into different languages is nothing new, but for most names it's usually pretty universal what the transliteration is supposed to be. For example, when the English name Michael is transliterated into French, it becomes Miguel. When the English name David is translated into Spanish, it becomes David. These are all universal. Nobody denies that these are the proper transliterations. But for some reason, when this guy's name gets transliterated into English, nobody can agree on a particular version. Of course, other Dragon Ball characters have multiple transliterations, like Senpyo and Korin, or Kinkai and Lord of Worlds. But for some reason, more than any other character, this jackass will send entire sections of the fandom into cussing contests about what people should call him. The Viz manga opted to simply directly translate each of these 4 Japanese characters into their Romanized counterparts, Ku, Ri, N. For some people, this is the only valid name to give him in English, and anyone who calls him literally anything else is a filthy dubtard who needs to kill themselves. Of course, this leads to serious problems when it comes to the anime, as well as review videos like mine, because how exactly do you pronounce this name? If you're just reading the manga, you don't need to know how to pronounce it. You just need to be able to recognize the specific combination of letters. To some Japanetists, you must pronounce it exactly as it is pronounced in Japanese. Even a moment ago, when I pronounced his Viz name syllable by syllable, I still didn't pronounce it precisely the way the Japanese pronounce it, inflections and all, and thus I committed a cardinal sin when I dared to speak his name incorrectly. Funimation, of course, had to actually pronounce this guy's name, so they opted for a fairly bog-standard transliteration, which I'll provide on screen and is pronounced exactly as it is spelled. Of course, because this is a departure from the one true name for this character, Funimation's voice actors and other employees have received constant, non-stop harassment and death threats from Japanetists who were absolutely enraged over such a horrific butchering of this character's name. And fans who use this name for the character are subject to equal, if not greater, vitriol. Surprisingly, the Harmony Gold dub doesn't get a fraction as much hate as Funimation does, even though they renamed the character to Bongo, an even further departure from the original than Funimation's name for him. But at the same time, this is the name I've grown up with associating with this character. As far as I'm concerned, calling this guy literally anything else just screws up my brain to such a degree that I simply can't associate him with any other name. So, what to do? So, after giving this a ton of thought, weighing the pros and cons of both sides, taking into account my personal comfort levels, ability to pronounce the name correctly, and the demands of various sects of the fandom, I have ultimately decided to call this character Whiskers the Wonder Baldo. Suck my dick. So anyway, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo has come to Roshi's island to ask to be his student. Roshi initially turns him away, saying that he doesn't have an open door policy when it comes to training, but Whiskers the Wonder Baldo knows Roshi's weakness, offering a dirty magazine as an offering. This works, and Roshi puts Whiskers the Wonder Baldo in the same status as Goku, meaning they still have to find him a girlfriend. Fortunately, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo knows how to perceive attractiveness in a female, so Roshi doesn't have to worry about Goku bringing back someone clearly not qualified. However, there's a slight problem. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo can't ride the flying Nimbus. It turns out that he has a whole bag of dirty magazines that he quickly gives to Master Roshi. However, this does raise a bit of a question. Is Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, bisexual? I ask this because, as Roshi is plowing through the magazines in rapid succession, he briefly comes across a magazine with a male model on the cover, suggesting that it actually contains naked men inside. Now, obviously, the reason Toei included that bit is for the gag of seeing Roshi be repulsed by the sight of a dick. But that still begs the question of why Whiskers the Wonder Baldo would have that magazine in the first place if he doesn't also like men. So Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is forced to hold on to Goku's back while Goku rides the flying Nimbus. Goku wonders if Roshi would be attracted to some farmer, but Whiskers the Wonder Baldo explains that it's a man. Cutting away to some old western pub in the desert, there's a bunch of wanted posters on the wall. Surprisingly, these wanted posters all report the bounties for their respective criminals in dollar signs, rather than the yen sign. Later in this saga, it will be revealed that the currency in this world is actually called zenny, which doesn't exist in the real world, so technically there's nothing wrong with using dollar signs to represent the currency. The dollar sign seems to be as good a choice as any. However, because this show takes place in Japan, you'd think that Toei would use the yen sign. My guess and this is pure speculation on my part, is that Toei chose the $sign specifically because it was the sign associated with the currency of Japan's largest trading partner, the United States. That way, the original target audience for this show, Japanese children of the 1980s, would immediately recognize it as a symbol of currency, while still keeping the symbol definitively foreign, so they don't confuse it with their own currency. So the camera zooms in on a blonde woman whose bounty is absolutely huge. Some bounty hunter calls her Launch and is determined to bring her in. Suddenly, a woman appears, but she has blue hair instead of blonde, so the bounty hunters don't get suspicious. However, as the wind comes up, the hair starts tickling her nose, causing her to sneeze. This turns her hair blonde, perfectly matching the wanted poster, and she becomes psychotically violent and begins wrecking the place. Launch finds a train and robs it, but the train driver radios to the police, who are now in hot pursuit. However, as she's kicking up dust, she sneezes and reverts back to her blue-haired version, who cries out for help. Goku hears this and swoops in to save her, thinking that the cops who were trying to arrest her are merely thugs. Now, see, this is a much better demonstration of Goku's naivety than what we had previously discussed. In the previous saga, Goku had 2 encounters with guns, Bulma in the first episode, and then the rabbits. But he doesn't quite understand who police are yet, so it makes sense that he would take one look at this situation and assume that these are just 2 random thugs ganging up on a helpless woman, just like the rabbits. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, who doesn't have that same excuse, instantly recognizes the police for who they are and backs out of the situation accordingly. Now that's more like it. So Goku makes quick work of the police, knocking them both out. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo confirms that Master Roshi would indeed like Launch, and so they take her with them. Launch goes along with it because she knows the police are after her, so she needs somewhere to hide until the statute of limitations passes on her various crimes. Goku goes into the house to fetch Master Roshi, and Launch explains to Whiskers the Wonder Baldo that the police who are attacking her were indeed real police, and that she changes whenever she sneezes. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo doesn't quite believe her, but she makes a believer out of all 3 of them by the end of the episode. Roshi and Launch get introduced, and Launch thinks the boys are his grandchildren. Roshi instead explains that the boys are actually his younger brothers. Not sure what kind of a pickup line that's supposed to be. Anyway, after that doesn't work, he explains that they're his students, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo further explains that Master Roshi is the greatest martial arts master alive today, and so Launch agrees to a martial arts lesson as well. Roshi brings out some uniforms, and Launch prepares to undress, but Whiskers the Wonder Baldo suggests that she change in the house, spoiling Roshi's attempt to see her naked. So it turns out that the uniforms Master Roshi provided were actually lingerie.
I'm wearing her clothes, her silk pantyhose, walking around in women's underwear.
So Launch sneezes and starts shooting at them. Then she sneezes again and changes back. But even the blue-haired Launch calls the other 3 pig-headed boys. This seems to suggest that even blue-haired Launch is fully aware that she's being sexualized and objectified. So, Launch, what can I honestly say about this character? Honestly, not a whole lot. Remember earlier when I said that Toriyama has yet to actually develop his writing skills beyond what's most expedient to making the audience laugh in the moment? Well, Launch here exemplifies that writing style. She never undergoes any character development, but that's probably because she never had any character to develop. She exists solely for the Jekyll and Hyde sneezing gag, nothing more, nothing less. She disappears at the start of the Saiyan saga, which is also when I and most others in the United States actually began watching the show. Although Toei created a few filler scenes with her in them, they were easily edited out of the Ocean dub of the show, so I had never heard of Launch before I began watching the Funimation dub of OG Dragon Ball, and I personally was flabbergasted that this woman was getting so much screen time, yet I had never heard of her before. All the other main characters who had been introduced up to this point, I knew exactly who they were, but I had never heard of Launch before. Frankly, the fact that she was able to be written out of the manga and Ocean dub of the anime without anything feeling like it was missing is a testament to just how expendable of a character she was. Contrast that with Goku's son surviving in the wilderness, which happens in the manga but isn't shown. Now that, I absolutely feel like something was removed from the story, even though technically the anime adds it rather than the manga removes it. So, in an attempt to give me something, anything, to say about this woman's character, let's dive into the world of the hypothetical. What if there was a Dragon Ball reboot starting from scratch, and I was the head writer for that project? How would I actually make a compelling character out of Launch? Well, beginning in the next saga, I would make it so that Launch was actually the result of some mad science experiment by the Red Ribbon Army to attempt to create a berserker warrior. This would foreshadow Dr. Gero's kidnapping of the two teenage siblings to create androids 17 and 18, as it would show that the Red Ribbon scientists aren't above literally kidnapping innocent people against their will and using them for their own sadistic means. More importantly, however, the blue-haired version of Launch absolutely hates herself because of her blonde version existing. Whenever her blonde version causes damage, and she reverts back to her blue-haired version, she looks at the damage caused, and tears begin to swell in her eyes because she knows that she is the one who did it. Meanwhile, in the Piccolo saga, when she sneezes and realizes she's holding a gun, she immediately throws it down in terror. Let's do something with that too. Maybe, while the boys are out doing their training, Roshi is helping Launch fight her fear of guns by having a 9mm pistol sitting on the dining table, and Launch is poking it with a 20-foot pole while Roshi's hands are on her shoulders, telling her that she's doing great, and she's sweating bullets the whole time. Then, sometime during the Red Ribbon Army saga, Launch actually hurts someone in her blonde form, and this time the victim isn't a martial artist who is able to shake it off like Roshi and the boys can. So she tries to kill herself in repentance, only for Master Roshi to stop her at the last minute. Then, Roshi remembers that Goku is out collecting Dragon Balls, and he gets an idea. They can use the Dragon Balls to wish for Launch to have the power to control herself in her blonde form. So when Goku embarks on his 3-year world exploration saga, he agrees to let Master Roshi borrow the 4-star Dragon Ball on the condition that he catches it before it flies off, just like Goku just did, and returns it at the next tournament. 3 years later, Launch is in her blonde form, and while she's way more confident and headstrong than her blue-haired version, at least she's not actively trying to kill them, which is something that happens around that time in the original manga with no explanation. And even in the anime, their attempts to explain her sudden change is, stretching credulity to say the least. In addition to giving Launch the power to control herself in her blonde form, she becomes so grateful for Roshi's kindness and efforts to give her her life back that she sincerely falls in love with Roshi, not even caring that it's a socially taboo age gap relationship. unlike her current version, who is only staying at Kame House in order to hide from the law enforcement while the statute of limitations runs out on her past crimes and nothing more. Now, wouldn't that have been a much more satisfying and compelling way of causing her to not be so violent all the time, than just having her be like, hey, you look familiar, I guess I'll spare your life? I certainly think so. Alas, because Toriyama sucks at writing compelling characters at this point in the story, that's not what we got. So Roshi capsulizes his entire house and the four hop into a hovercraft. They arrive on a much larger island, and Goku inspects the island on the flying Nimbus, reporting back to Roshi that there are already people here. I suppose this is kinda an organic display of his naivety, but it's bordering the line. Obviously, Goku's only experience with martial arts training was with his grandpa in the wilderness. However, it still stretches credulity that he would assume that the solitariness was somehow essential to effective training, and not simply that's the kind of life that Gohan preferred to live. Besides, in a little bit, Roshi will tell Goku that his grandpa did the exact same training on this very island. What? Did Gohan never regale Goku with stories of his training with Master Roshi? Did Goku never ask his grandpa about his training? I mean, later in the series, Master Roshi only reveals the name of his master, Mutaito, when it became necessary for him to explain the backstory of the newest villain, implying that none of the characters knew about that already. So, is it considered impolite in Japan to ask a sensei about his martial arts history? If so, then I suppose that would explain that Goku doesn't already know what to expect, but it still seems like an odd assumption that being away from people is necessary for effective martial arts training. After all, the genre of Wuxia, which is actually spelled with a silent W and an X in the center rather than an SH for some reason, martial artists are known to travel the world and right wrongs as they come across them, and that is considered a key part of their martial arts training. So it would be rather out of genre for this training to require solitude like that. So Launch goes inside to prepare dinner while Roshi decides to gauge his pupil's starting potential with a 100-meter dash. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo volunteers to run first, saying he could make the Olympics if he wanted to. And he backs that up by clocking in at 10.4 seconds. I actually looked this up, and that truly is an Olympics-worthy performance. At the time this manga chapter was written, the most recent Olympics was the 1984 Games in Los Angeles, and there, the 8th place runner in the men's 100-meter dash clocked in at 10.35 seconds, which would have rounded up to 10.4. Of course, that wouldn't have gotten him a medal, but Whiskers the Wonder Baldo only said that he could make the Olympics, not that he would actually win the gold. Goku initially clocks in at only 11 seconds, but he then asks to try again with better shoes. He explains that his shoes are all torn up to the point where he can see his own toes. I suppose he must have had a spare pair of shoes when he returned to his one-room shack for the final time, because that's the only way it makes any sense that Roshi would just happen to have a pair of shoes exactly Goku's size on hand. With proper footwear, Goku now clocks in at 8 seconds even. To put that in perspective, the current world record for the men's 100-meter dash, the current one, let alone the record at the time this manga chapter was written, belongs to Usain Bolt, who clocked in at 9.58 seconds. After running the 100-meter dash in 5.6 seconds himself, Roshi explains that running that fast is all about surpassing normal human limitations, but it's pretty clear Goku has already surpassed them. So, with their physical abilities properly gauged, Roshi then decides to give them a test of their mental faculties. This is perhaps the most iconic part of Roshi's training, and it's definitely my personal favorite. He picks up a random stone off the ground, writes his own name in Japanese on it, has the boys memorize it, and then throws it off a cliff. He then explains that the boys are tasked with finding the stone, explaining that doing so takes a calm and focused mind. To motivate them, he explains that whoever doesn't find the stone will have to go without supper, and if neither of them find the rock in 30 minutes, they both go without supper. When they reach the edge of the cliff, Goku simply jumps to the bottom, explaining that he used to do this all the time in the jungle. We then get another instance of foreshadowing that Goku is an alien when Whiskers the Wonder Baldo says,
That guy can't be human!
Realizing he's hopelessly outclassed, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo decides to cheat. He borrows a pen from a stranger and writes Roshi's name on it, and then takes it to Master Roshi. Roshi takes one look at the stone, realizes it's not his handwriting, and sends Whiskers the Wonder Baldo back out. Meanwhile, Goku is getting closer to the stone as he sniffs it out. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo takes out a saber-toothed tiger, kind of like what Goku did in the first episode, except he doesn't play around with the tiger but instead just knocks him out with a single blow. He then overhears Goku explain that he found it. When the two reunite, Goku explains that he found it because it smelled like Master Roshi. Goku's dog-like ability to identify people's unique scents is something that will only come up in this one saga and never be a part of Goku's character after this. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo tries to gaslight Goku into thinking that it might be a decoy, offering to verify it for him, only to run off with the stone. They eventually brawl for it, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo demands that Goku not squeal to Master Roshi if he wins. However, he loses, but throws a decoy rock to make Goku chase after it. Despite winning the fight, which technically means he isn't beholden to his promise anymore, Goku still keeps his word and doesn't tell Master Roshi the truth. Then again, what evidence does he have? However, while Goku does have to go without supper, I still feel it's unnecessarily cruel to make Goku stand there and watch the other three as they chow down. Couldn't Goku just be sent off to bed or something? However, Launch reveals that the fish she used for the stew was actually a poisonous puffer fish. Surprisingly, Roshi and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo begin to feel sick immediately, even though, according to this source, symptoms don't kick in until about 20 minutes to 3 hours after eating. A few days later, we're finally ready to begin training. Blonde Launch is creeped out by Goku being in her bed and picks a fight with Goku, but Goku has finally had enough of her bullshit and knocks her ass out. This will ensure she's kept in line for the rest of the series. With the boys awake and outside, Roshi first delivers a speech about the responsibilities of the martial artist. This is typical for Uchiha stories, so it should be addressed. He impresses on the boys that it's an egregious abuse of martial arts to use the gift to just get laid or to pick fights. However, it is the responsibility of the martial artist to defeat people who oppress others. This lesson will get a major payoff in the saga after this one, where Goku starts adventuring around the world and doing precisely what Master Roshi tells him is the right thing to do. And with that, they go for a quick jog. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo thinks that Master Roshi's training is surprisingly easy, but that's a pathetic thing for him to think. He's supposed to be the grounded character compared to Goku, so he should know full well that this light jog is just the beginning. They reach a goat next to a helicopter and Roshi greets him. He explains that the first task of the day is delivering milk across the countryside. On foot. In only a few hours.
But sir, I've got a helicopter.
Flying in comfort would hardly be training, now would it?
But every bottle has to be delivered by breakfast time.
Don't worry, my friend. I'll have them moving like lightning.
Bear in mind that the boys are moving significantly slower than they were during the 100-meter dash, so I'd hardly call that moving like lightning. However, since we're never given any indication as to exactly how far they have to travel or exactly how much time they have, I'm going to give this one a pass in terms of credulity, even if I personally think it's horse shit. What intrigues me about this particular exercise is the milk. Obviously, it's the walking that is the actual exercise, so why couldn't Roshi have just had them doing that? My personal theory is that by working for the milk delivery company, he's also earning a wage for services rendered, which is how he pays for his living expenses, which he now has a lot more of since he's currently residing in an actual village instead of by himself. So they eventually come upon a mountain with a staircase.
On your way up the 7,000 steps again, Klimek?
Whiskers the Wonder Baldo eats his words about Roshi's training being easy, and while I agree he should have known such a judgment was premature at the time, this much shouldn't be that difficult for him. After all, in his first episode, we literally see him running through the desert as fast as a car. And running on sand is already no joke. Anyway, Goku mentions he could deliver the milk faster if he used the flying Nimbus, but Roshi points out that wouldn't be training. He then goes on to say that Goku's grandfather, Gohan, once did the same exercises and never once complained either. Of course, we have no way of knowing if he isn't just out and out lying or not. As they reach the top of the mountain, they meet a monk, whose name is never given, but I'm gonna assume his name is Arngir. Thank you, those of you who got that reference. Anyway, this monk explains, presumably based on past experiences dealing with Roshi's students, that Roshi is planning on enlisting the boys in what is known in the English dub as the World Martial Arts Tournament. The World Martial Arts Tournament is one of the most important events in the Dragon Ball lore, so obviously I need to stop and talk about it for a bit. In Japanese, it's known as the Tenkaichi Budokai, which directly translates into Strongest Under the Heavens. In universe, this tournament is supposed to be the Olympics or WrestleMania of martial arts. However, it's only that important to the Martial Arts Society, as evidenced by the fact that the crowd there is only a few rows, and also as evidenced by the fact that the prize for winning the tournament is only 500,000 zeni. That sounds like a lot, but we have to remember that even though the zeni is represented by the dollar sign, that doesn't mean it has the same buying power as a US dollar. According to the Dragon Ball Super Exciting Guide, a zeni is actually the equivalent to 1 Japanese yen, which makes sense since that's the currency that its creator, Akira Toriyama, is most familiar with. However, when you apply the real-world conversion from Japanese yen to American dollars, that means that the grand prize for this tournament, which only takes place every 5 years and where some people train their whole lives just to make it past the preliminaries, comes out to an astonishing, life-changing amount of $3,200. Now, to be fair, that's 2025 money, and this saga was first published in 1985. However, even accounting for inflation, the grand prize isn't that much. It's manga chapter 35 when the announcer first says that the grand prize is 500,000 zeni. That was originally published in Japan on July 30th, 1985. When I enter that into this inflation calculator, I can see that $3,200 in July of 1985 had the buying power of $9,641 in September of 2025, the most recent month I'm able to get data for. When I run it for August, it goes down to 96.17, and when I run it for July, it goes down to 95.89. So let's say that for December, when I'm writing this script, it would be an even 10 grand. Even then, that's still not that much. Hell, game shows from 1985 would routinely give out more prize money than that 5 days a week, and it didn't even require people train their whole lives for it. However, for those in the Martial Arts Society, it's not even really about the prize money, but the title. As Harmony Gold's version of Goku famously said,
"Isn't the fun of fighting enough? Why give out a prize?"
That is certainly a valid thing to strive for. Besides, one could reasonably assume that unless you appear in the tournament under an alias, like the upcoming winner of this tournament will eventually do, you may suddenly find yourself with all kinds of endorsements and other highly lucrative offers, kind of like gold medal winners in the real world. So, in-universe, the tournament exists as the holy grail of martial arts achievements, which makes it rather awkward that Toriyama is introducing it right off the bat. Narratively, it's designed to give the boys a goal to work towards to help motivate them to train even harder. Roshi warns the boys not to get any hopes of winning the tournament, but the only reason they shouldn't have hopes of winning is because it's the final destination for martial artists. Consider most other sports. Do most other athletes go from training to the pros in one fell swoop? Hell no! At least in the United States, they start on high school teams, where the highest accolade they can get is a state championship. Then, they move to the NCAA, and from there, they get recruited by talent scouts to join a professional team. Even then, they still aren't the world champions, as they then have to go through an entire regular season, winning enough games to qualify for the playoffs. Once you finally, after an entire lifetime of training and games, finally make it to the playoffs of the professional league, that would be the equivalent, not of winning the World Martial Arts Tournament, but of simply making it to the quarterfinals. And making it to the actual finals is the equivalent of making it to the Super Bowl / World Series / World Cup of your sport. In other words, Roshi wouldn't have to worry about the boys getting high hopes of winning the tournament on their first attempt if he would have just started them out in smaller, more localized tournaments instead. Not only that, but it would have given the series a much better sense of progression, instead of the characters' powers ballooning to such a degree that by the time Dragon Ball Z begins to air, the characters were able to rip entire planets asunder with their bare hands. We could instead have followed Goku as he slowly climbed the ranks of the martial arts community, culminating in him finally winning the big one at the age of 30 or 40. Kind of like seeing a babyface wrestler finally win the world title for the first time in the main event of WrestleMania after years and years of grinding. There are wrestlers who have won literally nothing but the big one, but they are exceptionally rare, and it's even rarer to find a wrestler to win nothing but the big one and actually have the audience buy them as a legitimate champion. Most wrestlers need to win a mid-card title like the Intercontinental Championship and have a decent run with that belt before they can be considered legitimate contenders for the world title. But because at this point in his career, Toriyama can't tell organic, well-plotted stories and instead flies by the seat of his pants, what we get instead is the boys being thrust straight into the biggest and most important martial arts tournament in the world. It's not god-awful per se, but in the words of a certain Disney princess, I want more! So anyway, about the training regiment, honestly it seems kinda absurd. Presumably, the whole point of these exercises is to push the boys past their built-in human limitations, but the exercises are so outrageous that you have to have already surpassed them in order to even do the exercises in the first place, as I alluded to earlier when I compared Goku's 100-meter dash to the IRL world record. Compare that to the famous movie that Toriyama is clearly satirizing with this saga, The Karate Kid, which came out exactly 1 year before this saga was originally published. In addition to that movie's climax being a local tournament that isn't the world's most important karate tournament, It also has the advantage that Nariyoshi Miyagi's wax-on, wax-off training style wasn't something that you had to already be a karate master to perform. Anyone can do the things that Daniel was made to do. Of course, this story is a little different. Rather than teaching the boys how to block attacks using counterintuitive moves, Roshi is supposed to be trying to get them to push themselves beyond their normal human limitations. In other words, he's supposed to be making them super-powered. I can certainly appreciate such a goal, but again, if you're going to do that, you shouldn't put your characters in a catch-22 where they have to already be at that level in order to do it. It's straining credulity is all I'm saying. In this training regiment's defense, it at least avoids the pitfall that the Harry Potter franchise falls into by still paying lip service to the boys receiving a traditional education in addition to their martial arts training. It's only for 1 hour a day, but it's better than nothing like in the Harry Potter series. Also, they admittedly do at least some exercises that are actual exercises, like swimming laps in the lake. Of course, Toriyama's gonna Toriyama, so of course Roshi says that there are sharks in the lake. Not exactly sure how that's possible since lakes are too small for sharks to have a viable habitat in them. People get bitten by sharks when they're at the beach, but that's because the beach is connected to the ocean, and that's where the sharks actually come from. It'd be a lot more believable if the lake instead had piranhas, which would still create the same sense of urgency for the boys that sharks would. However, the stupidest part of the entire training regiment has to be the last thing we see them do. Dodging bees. Think about it. Roshi says at the end of the first day that they'll be doing the same exercises every day for the next 8 months, which is how long they have until the World Martial Arts Tournament begins. And this exercise involves him whacking a beehive so that the bees will attack the boys. Bear in mind that a bee loses its stinger once it stings, and once it loses its stinger, it quickly dies. So this means that every single day for 270 consecutive days, Master Roshi is going to have to find a brand new beehive for the boys to use. Where the hell does he get 270 different beehives, each full of an entire colony of bees? Same thing with the construction work. Unlike the milk delivery, this time the manager explicitly says he'll pay Roshi for the boys' labor. And unlike the beehives, I can readily believe that a construction project would take 8 months to complete. But isn't it a bit convenient that there just happens to be a construction project going on this island right around the time Roshi was training the boys? How would Roshi's training have worked if there wasn't a construction project going on? At least with the milk delivery, we can reasonably assume that this is something that has to be done every day. What's their excuse here? However, there is one moment in this episode that is not only tolerable, but straight up awesome. Seeing as this training regiment is a blatant ripoff of the Karate Kid, it's only fitting that one of the boys be motivated to train primarily by a desire to fight his bullies. Since Goku never had any bullies, that role instead falls to Whiskers the Wonder Baldo. He tells himself to keep it up until you can beat them, and we get a flashback to his past where we see a bunch of other Wonder Baldos beating the shit out of him. Admittedly, this is filler, but in the actual tournament we'll get a moment that isn't filler that expressly affirms this. The only real problem with this character motivation is that it seems to be at odds with Whiskers the Wonder Baldo's originally stated motive for wanting to study martial arts, so he could become popular with the girls. But even then, it doesn't really contradict that, since that could still be the reason he joined the Temple of Wonder Baldos in the first place, and he only sought out Master Roshi so that he could get even with his bullies. So anyway, Master Roshi tells the boys that he will only teach them actual fighting techniques once they can move a giant rock. After 6 months, they finally managed to move it. They say they've already moved it, but I don't see any disturbed dirt until they move it right in front of Roshi. But the important thing is that they move it in front of him, so it still counts. What happens next differs between the Japanese and Funimation. In the original Japanese version, Master Roshi explains that his fighting style doesn't actually have moves. Then what the hell do you call the Kamehameha wave? However, in the Funimation dub, he explains that he still isn't actually ready to teach them real fighting moves, and that's only to come after they compete once in the World Martial Arts Tournament. This is reinforced after the tournament when Master Roshi, in the Japanese version, tells them that the training is actually complete, but in the Funimation dub, he tells them that the real training is just beginning. However, this in turn just raises the question of why he didn't just tell them that from the get-go instead of giving them a challenge of moving a rock. Of course, that was in the Japanese dub because it was in the original and there was no way they could edit the dialogue to make it make sense otherwise. That said, I still prefer this change over the original. It has its own problems, but it makes Roshi look like much less of a bald-faced liar. In fact, even discounting the Kamehameha wave, Master Roshi absolutely knows quite a few martial arts moves that he could teach the boys but simply doesn't, including the drunken boxing technique, the afterimage technique, Sleepy Boy, the Lightning Flash Surprise, and even the Evil Containment Wave. Well, he wouldn't teach the last one for obvious reasons, but that's still quite a repertoire. In addition, it much better reinforces the lesson that Master Roshi wants to impress on his students, that you are never done training, and that there is always someone out there stronger than you. By having these 8 months be only the first phase of their training rather than the be-all end-all that it is in the Japanese version, the Funimation dub gets that message across much better. So yeah, score 1 for the Funimation dub. Speaking of score, I've decided to actually keep score. In the previous episode, I declared that Funimation's changes to the story were actually improvements on 4 separate occasions, covering up Goku's nudity, at least in the 1995 version, not calling Shenron a god because he clearly isn't a god, Bulma saying that Goku isn't from Earth in the second episode, and changing Roshi's request to Bulma to simply go on a date with him instead of getting to molest her, which frankly ought to count as a million improvements, but I'll only count it as 1. I also agreed that one of their changes was for the worse, changing the reason she decided to join Goku and Turtle to her simply being spooked by a dinosaur instead of her needing Goku's Dragon Ball. So at the end of episode 1, the Funimation dub is leading 4-1 in terms of whether the changes made the show better or worse. Now, I just declared that one of Funimation's changes, Roshi's explanation as to why he isn't teaching actual fighting moves yet, is a superior edit. So that makes 5 wins and 1 loss for the dub. Spoiler alert, by the time I reach the end of the series, Funimation is going to have a commanding lead in terms of instances where the edits make the show better. And by the time I finish Dragon Ball GT, that lead will likely be in triple digits. I'll give Toei a win from time to time when I feel it's merited, but don't expect it to happen very often. Anyway, let's check back on Bulma and company. On the first day of the boys' training, we briefly cut away to Yamcha beating up a bunch of guys at a dojo, and he eventually goes up against the strongest guy at the dojo, who is never given a name, but I'm gonna call him Muscle Mario.
Why won't you stand still, you little coward?
Because these guys aren't providing him with any real challenge, he decides to go train in the wilderness. I gotta admit, for a character that will eventually become a running joke and even a meme in the series, this has to be Yamcha at his most badass. Of course, him training in the wilderness comes at a cost because he ends up ghosting Bulma, and remember that him getting a girlfriend and ultimately getting married is his greatest desire. Bulma is obviously pissed off that Yamcha hasn't even tried to contact her in 2 months, not even by postcard, and frankly I don't blame her for being pissed off like that. When Yamcha finally shows up after 2 months, she still isn't forgiving him, so she demands that he make it up to her. Meanwhile, the boys contemplate what Roshi means when he told them to simply see the tournament as the next phase of their training. Goku suggests that they view their opponents like another day of construction work, but what I don't get is, why are the boys working at a leisurely pace? Remember that this is supposed to be training, not simply work, so they're supposed to be pushing themselves. The first time they did the work, they were working so hard that they broke the pickaxe. Hey, if you made it this far into the video, you're obviously enjoying the video. So why not show how much you enjoy my content by throwing some monetary support my way? If you're watching this video during the initial premiere, the quickest and easiest way to throw some support my way is through Super Chats. Even if you didn't catch this video during the initial premiere, Super Thanks should still be available. You can also support me on a recurring basis by becoming a channel member. Those who support me that way get access to my Discord account and my official Discord server, allowing us to chat about anything, anytime. It doesn't even have to be related to video games, Dragon Ball, or my channel in any way. Just about anything that may strike your fancy, within reason of course, I am up for a conversation about it on Discord. So what are the benefits of supporting me with donations? Well, in addition to my eternal gratitude, as well as the aforementioned Discord contacts, silver supporters, that is, those who support me with recurring payments of at least $5 a month, are allowed to request video topics from me. I only entertain video requests from those who are supporting me on a recurring basis, for reasons I explain in this video right here. Of course, if you want to be guaranteed to have your video request fulfilled within certain common sense limitations, of course, then you can become a gold level supporter, supporting me with recurring donations of at least $20 a month. When you do that, you get to commission videos from me about specific topics and, subject to certain reasonable limitations, I am guaranteed to fulfill that request. Of course, I want you all to understand that this support is 100% optional. It is much appreciated if you provide it, but if you don't provide it, I think no less of you. Even if you cancel your support later down the line, I will accept that cancellation with grace, and thank you for the support you already gave. And to prove it, here are a few testimonials from some of my past and present supporters.
A bit after I became a bronze member of the channel, Acer sent me a message thanking me for my donation and asking what I felt he could do better with this content. It's really cool to have a content creator who engages actively with his fans in this way, and makes the channel feel less like a soulless group of videos and more like an actual community. He's also one of the few creators who doesn't try to guilt you if you have to stop your monetary support, instead just asking you to support the channel in other ways. It's refreshing to have a content creator who treats his subscribers and supporters like individuals and members of a community, rather than just faceless numbers.
If there's one thing that Acer has, it's easily time for his fans, and that was really evident to me the second I decided to donate. Even though it was just $1, he was just really quick to come thank me and was never really against any ideas I had for his channel. It felt really cool to kind of be a part of his channel as it's growing. It was definitely worth it. I would recommend it.
I've been supporting Acerthorn's Patreon for over a year now, not only because he's a great content creator, but also because he's extremely grateful to his Patreons for any and every contribution they make. Even if you join his $1 tier, he will still reach out to you to show his appreciation for your support.
Hi, I'm Verb. Not to take up too much of your time, but I want to talk to you about donating to Acerthorn's channel. I've only recently started doing so now that I have the chance to, and I'm happy with how it's been so far. He's grateful about whatever you give him, and he doesn't ask for much. He doesn't try to keep you donating or pressure you. All he does is just feel grateful if you give him anything. So, if you're feeling a little bit generous and you like the content he makes, you should absolutely go ahead and donate to him.
But even if any and all forms of direct monetary support are entirely off the table, there are still ways to support me. First, pretty please turn off your ad blocker. If you can't support me directly, ad revenue is the only option I have. Second, be sure to leave a like on my videos and also leave a comment. Even if you can't think of anything to say, just leave some kind of comment. You could just say, here's a comment just for engagement. Or you could just say, of course, engagement helps boost my videos in the algorithm, but remember that views and watch time are still king. So the best way you can support me without money is by binge watching my videos. I have playlists where I separate my videos by topic, so you can literally leave the computer unattended while you give me passive views on the videos that you most care about. Views, watch time, and most importantly, ad revenue. Any and all forms of the aforementioned support, or any combination thereof, are all very much appreciated. Alright, recommencing the video you all came to see in 3, 2, 1. So 2 months go by, and now it's the day before the tournament. Roshi tells the boys to take off their shells, and they're amazed at how high they can jump and how fast they can run. This is basically the equivalent to the point in The Karate Kid where Miyagi shows Daniel that these menial chores have actually taught Daniel how to guard. So Launch gives the boys some suits to wear. Strangely enough, Goku instantly knows how to put on a suit. Even the tie. And that's something even I often need a YouTube video to show me how to do. And I'm not even a feral child. And don't tell me this is because Goku is becoming more worldly, because in the very next scene he's mesmerized by the concept of an airplane and also by the concept of city lights. At the tournament, the boys are registering and they meet up with Bulma and company. Bulma tells Roshi that she tried to visit Goku, but when she showed up at his island, nobody was there. That's kind of weird since she never learned where Roshi's was. Goku reunites with Yamcha and he introduces Yamcha to Whiskers the Wonder Baldo. However, this actually creates a plot hole. See, all of this is filler. In the manga, the tournament all takes place in a single sitting. All the fighters arrive, register, fight in the preliminaries, then have the main tournament itself, all without any interruptions. Goku actually meets Yamcha during the preliminaries, rather than while registering. However, in the anime, they register the night before the tournament and get a hotel, which is okay, but then the anime still shows the boys registering for the tournament the morning of, like in the manga, even though they should already be registered. Weird. Next up, Roshi gives the boys their uniforms, orange shirts and pants with blue boots, with the turtle hermit symbol on their chest covering their heart. This is such an iconic look for the characters that, at least with Goku, it'll be an important part of his look for the entire rest of the series. He'll only get a new outfit at the very end of the series after he's become a grandfather. Non-participants aren't allowed in the gymnasium to see the preliminaries, so Roshi has to bid the boys farewell. Inside the gymnasium, Goku is excited as hell, but Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is freaking out. So a monk begins to speak, and he explains that there are 137 fighters, and that they'll be divided into 8 preliminary brackets, with 2 brackets to a ring. If there were exactly 128 fighters, that would be a perfect power of 8. So there would be exactly 16 fighters to a bracket, but since there's 9 more than that, that means that 7 brackets will have 17 fighters each, and 1 bracket will have 18 fighters. This means that 7 fighters will apparently get a bye past the first preliminary round, and 1 incredibly lucky fighter will get a double bye. I suppose it doesn't really matter how they actually sort out the preliminary structure, but I really wish I knew how they did it. Anyway, the monk explains the rules of the preliminary round. Once the fighters are slotted into the tournament brackets, each match will have a 1-minute time limit. Competitors lose if they give up, are knocked out for a 10 count, or any part of their body touches the outside of the ring. However, all too often during the preliminaries, fighters are declared knocked out immediately, even without a 10 count. Any fights that last the full minute without a winner being declared are supposedly decided by points. However, this is never shown, and I really wish I knew how the point system actually worked. However, another interesting thing the monk says is that killing your opponent is strictly forbidden and that anyone who does so will be banned from the tournament, but it doesn't say that anyone who does it will be prosecuted under the law. This is interesting because it opens up a possibility that we'll actually get a payoff in the next tournament when a character named Manwolf attacks his opponent with a knife, and while he's of course disqualified for that, he doesn't care about that. If he had succeeded in killing his opponent, he would have done so in broad daylight in front of hundreds of witnesses, and unlike future villains, I don't think he's powerful enough to overpower the police. So the only way his actions make sense is if they're technically legal while in the context of this tournament, even if the tournament bylaws forbid it. So the fighters draw numbers randomly so they can begin the preliminaries. Goku draws number 70 while Whiskers the Wonder Baldo draws number 93. Supposedly this puts them both in block 3, but in opposite brackets. Meanwhile, Yamcha is number 35 in block 2. Yamcha is way more confident than Whiskers the Wonder Baldo because he wants his rematch with Goku to be on the grand stage where the ring is bigger and there's no time limit. However, one thing I don't get is the fact that Goku is in the ring immediately, but Yamcha isn't, so he's able to watch Goku's match. Remember that there's only 34 fighters per block because there's 17 fighters per bracket until you get to the final bracket. So if Yamcha is number 35, shouldn't he be facing off against number 36 in the first block 2 match alongside Goku? What, did the Block 2 referee just arbitrarily decide to call the fighters in reverse order, but the Block 3 referee didn't? Or did Toriyama just pull an Amber Heard on us and completely shit the bed? So Goku's first opponent is a big muscly guy. Goku dodges and gets behind his opponent so fast that his opponent can't even see his movement. He then pokes his opponent in the leg, thinking he's just getting his opponent's attention, but inadvertently applies so much force that he knocks his opponent out of the ring. Everyone except Yamcha thinks his opponent just slipped and fell. Meanwhile, Goku warns Whiskers the Wonder Baldo that they shouldn't use their full strength yet, or they might end up seriously hurting someone. However, that character thread of Whiskers the Wonder Baldo wanting to overcome his bullies still needs a payoff, so as soon as Goku says this, 2 of Whiskers the Wonder Baldo's old buddies show up and start antagonizing him. One of them reveals himself as Whiskers the Wonder Baldo's first opponent in the preliminaries. This is Whiskers the Wonder Baldo at his absolute deepest and most interesting. Admittedly, it's a stock character arc, downright ripped off wholesale from the Karate Kid, but that's still better than what we usually get from Toriyama. Goku fully supports Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, even though he previously screwed Goku over. I suppose he realizes that accidentally did him a favor by saving him from the puffer fish. Anyway, he tells Whiskers the Wonder Baldo to hit the bully as hard as he possibly can. Doing so, he kicks the bully so hard that he's sent flying through the wall. My only complaint about this character arc, aside from its stockness, is that it shouldn't have been fully resolved in the preliminaries. Remember that there were 2 bullies just now, and one of them was jealous that he wouldn't get a turn with Whiskers the Wonder Baldo. Wouldn't it have been so much more satisfying if the other bully made it to the quarterfinals, and so Whiskers the Wonder Baldo got to defeat him too? Only now, this bully actually puts up a solid fight, not because he's way stronger than the other one, but because now he's seen what Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is capable of, and so now he's taking the fight seriously. But even though he lasts a little longer than the first bully, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo still ends up defeating him handily. Not only would that have been a far more compelling resolution to this character arc in my opinion, but it would also have spared us the problem of having the quarterfinals in the tournament mostly be gimmick fights. In the preliminaries, the protagonists, Goku, Yamcha, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, all defeat their opponents effortlessly. The matches have a 1-minute time limit, but in practice, they only last about 5 seconds. In the quarterfinals, 3 of the 4 matches are basically like that, except the fighters have gimmicks which pad them out. Once those gimmicks run their course, they're defeated just as easily as the preliminary opponents are. Bacterian and Ranfan are the most obvious examples of this, but Giran is also mostly a gimmick fighter. His gimmick is that he's a monster who has crazy monster abilities. His wings and his merry-go-round gum are his gimmick, and once that gimmick runs its course, Giran surrenders. Instead, it's the semifinals rather than the quarterfinals, when the fighters actually put up a fight besides just playing off their gimmicks. Having Whiskers the Wonder Baldo face the other one of his old bullies in the quarterfinals instead of Bacterian would have done wonders to make the quarterfinals feel like the actual next step in the tournament, rather than just being preliminaries with gimmicks. Instead, not only do we not see Whiskers the Wonder Baldo overcome his other bully, but the other bully is never even seen or heard from again, at least not in the tournament itself. Did the other bully withdraw from the tournament? Did he lose to another preliminary opponent? We'll never know because Toriyama apparently thought it was enough to just have Whiskers the Wonder Baldo defeat one bully, even though he wrote in 2. Tell me, Toriyama, was it really worth it? So Yamcha is up and defeats his opponent with a single kick, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo takes a dragon stomp and gets up like nothing happened, making his opponent surrender. We then get a montage of victories, and we cut to the final match of each preliminary bracket. Yamcha defeats a humanoid wolf using his Wolf Fang Fist. This should be foreshadowing as to how far behind Yamcha is beginning to fall, that he has to use his signature attack during the preliminaries rather than on the main stage. Compare that to Goku using the Kamehameha Wave. He'll use it in this tournament, but only in the final match where the stakes are highest. If Yamcha has to use his ultimate attack just to make it to the quarterfinals, that's an omen as to how he's going to perform when he actually gets to the quarterfinals. So, Goku and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo each handily defeat their preliminary opponents and are overjoyed that they're both going to the quarterfinals. They go outside and meet Bulma and Master Roshi, who isn't at all surprised that they made it this far. However, as soon as the boys say they have to report to the main hall for the tournament, they suddenly realize that Master Roshi is nowhere to be seen. Where could he have gone? In the main hall, the 8 quarterfinalists are all gathered. One of the finalists has Master Roshi's voice actor, his figure, and even his beard, but he has hair so it can't possibly be Master Roshi. Is suddenly flirting with some woman who apparently also made it to the quarterfinals. Everyone suddenly notices Bacterian for the first time. And I'm sorry, but there is just no way this is the first time anyone is noticing him. His entire gimmick is that he has a rancid body odor because he hasn't taken a bath since the day he was born. So you're honestly telling me that nobody actually smelled him in the preliminaries? Yamcha remembers not Master Roshi from the preliminaries, but he never actually noticed Bacterian until now? It's impossible to be within 100 meters of this guy and not smell him, so how did nobody notice him until now? I'll tell you how, because he didn't exist until now. Not just in the manga, but in universe. He briefly appeared in filler when Bulma was trying to look into the gymnasium through the window, but that didn't happen in the manga. Remember earlier when I pointed out that at this point in his career, Toriyama really isn't that good at telling coherent stories because his primary focus on Dr. Slump was writing whatever was funniest in that moment, storytelling be damned? Well, this is a prime example of that writing style. Bacterian didn't exist before now because Toriyama only just now decided he was in the mood to dabble in gross-out humor for a little while, so he only just now wrote a character into the story and just slotted him into one of the 8 quarterfinalists without any regard as to whether it made any sense at all. To put this in perspective, just imagine if, in the next saga, when Goku is out collecting Dragon Balls, he suddenly has an Indian boy riding on the cloud with him. Where did he come from? This story never even tries to tell us. That's basically what Bacterian's sudden appearance here feels like. Anyway, we meet a new character whose name we'll never know. He's simply referred to as the Announcer. He explains the rules for the main tournament, which are exactly like the preliminaries except for there being no time limit. He then calls the fighters one at a time to draw numbers to be randomly placed in the quarterfinals. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is appalled that he's the one who has to face Bacterian, while Yamcha is going up against the Master Roshi lookalike named Jackie Chun. Some guy named Nam is going up against the woman Jackie was flirting with earlier, whose name is Ranfan, and Goku is going up against a monster named Giran. The announcer tells the live audience that they're getting ready to begin the main tournament. A humanoid dog monk, who presumably is in charge of everything, decides to give a speech, but it's only a bark. I'm sorry, but that's just not funny to me. So it's time for match 1, Bacterian versus Whiskers the Wonder Baldo. They fight for a bit, or rather, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo tries to dodge and tries to endure the stench, while Bacterian just does gross stuff. Eventually, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo goes down, and the announcer acknowledges that he's prone, but another monk is the one who actually administers the 10 count. This is another inconsistency. In the quarterfinals of this one tournament, a monk makes the 10 count and will also rule on Goku's use of the Flying Nimbus in his match, while the announcer only provides commentary. However, starting with the semifinals, and for all future tournaments for the rest of the series, the announcer suddenly performs all functions, serving as commentator, counting prone opponents, and interpreting the rules, e.g., deciding that Hero's bottle doesn't count as a weapon or a tool, all by himself. I certainly approve of consolidating the roles like that, but Toriyama really should have waited until the next tournament before he did it, so it didn't create a plot hole like it does here. So they fight for a little more, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is on his back again, subject to another 10 count. Goku tells him to just focus his mind and he won't smell it because he doesn't have a nose. Now, whether or not this is true is a subject of intense debate among Dragon Ball fans. Not the art. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is always drawn without a nose in both the manga and the anime, but whether that's meant to just be an artistic liberty or an actual canon in-universe fact about his body is debated. Sure, Goku says he doesn't have a nose, but that could just be him breaking the fourth wall. No other anatomical anomalies are treated as artistic liberties. Goku's tail, Tien's third eye, these all definitively exist in-universe and there's no two ways about them. But what about Whiskers the Wonder Baldo's nose? Later in this tournament, he'll get a nosebleed, and in the next saga, he'll try to sniff something. Both of these seem to contradict what we see here, that he has no nose and therefore no sense of smell. To me, this really shouldn't be a debate, and not because I feel the evidence for one answer is overwhelming, rather, the question itself is a complete farce. The answer to this question is precisely the same as the answer to the question I asked a moment ago of how nobody smelled Bacterian during the preliminaries, because Toriyama is just making stuff up as he goes along without any regard to whether it fits into any past or future continuity. Frankly, the only reason we're asking this question in the first place is because we fell in love with Dragon Ball Z when Toriyama actually had some experience under his belt and actually got pretty good at telling stories rather than just telling jokes, and therefore we're invested in the story and characters. Had the quality of the story stayed like this for the entire duration of the series, we probably wouldn't have cared as much if Whiskers the Wonder Baldo has a nose in-universe, any more so than we typically care how exactly Wile E. Coyote can fall off a 1,000-foot-high cliff and be perfectly fine one jump cut later. It was never a concern for the writers, so it shouldn't be a concern for the audience. But if I absolutely had to take this question seriously, I would say that Whiskers the Wonder Baldo doesn't have a nose, but he can smell. But because he doesn't have a nose, he can turn his sense of smell off whenever he wants to. After all, Goku doesn't simply say that Whiskers the Wonder Baldo can't actually smell it. He says, focus your mind and you won't smell it. This seems to imply that focusing is a prerequisite to not smelling it. Of course, as I've already made clear, I'm giving this way more thought than Toriyama ever did, but it's only because this question is debated far more than it has any right to be. The question was never meant to persist any longer than Bacterian as a character was. So now that Bacterian's gimmick has run its course, he makes one final Hail Mary attempt to defeat Whiskers the Wonder Baldo by hogging some loogies at him. However, dodging projectiles is nothing for a competent martial artist, so Whiskers the Wonder Baldo now defeats Bacterian just as easily as he defeated all of his preliminary opponents. Goku joins Whiskers the Wonder Baldo in the ring as they celebrate his victory, but they can't find Master Roshi anywhere in the crowd. Goku sniffs him out and can confirm that his scent is out there in the crowd somewhere, but he can't pin down exactly where. Meanwhile, several dozen feet behind where Goku's nose is pointed, Jackie-chan is flirting with Ranfan again. They both notice Nam, and we get a little bit of his backstory. Nam comes from a really poor village. They've run out of water and can't wait until the rainy season, so they decide to buy water from the nearby city to survive, but they don't have any money. So Nam enters this tournament in the hopes of using the prize money to buy water for everyone. So it's time for match 2, Yamcha versus Jackie-chan. This is the only quarterfinals match that isn't primarily a gimmick match, and even then, Jackie-chan still defeats his opponent just as quickly as a preliminary match. He just spends most of the match casually dodging Yamcha. When he does go on the attack, he defeats Yamcha with one blow, just like in the preliminaries. Of course, there's still some stuff to talk about in this match. For starters, Yamcha doesn't already know exactly who this guy is, which is a first for his character. In the last saga, he knew about Ox King, the Kamehameha Wave, and Monster Carrot. In this saga, he knew about Bacterian and was able to exposit about his dirty fighting style. But here, he only knows what Jackie-chan revealed during the preliminaries. Now, this is supposed to be a huge red flag as to who Jackie-chan is, but the execution is lacking. First of all, while Yamcha will eventually be a reliable source of exposition throughout OG Dragon Ball, at this point it's too early for it to really seem out of character for him. So far, he's only given exposition on 4 different characters, which isn't enough for me to buy that him not knowing who one guy is any sort of red flag. Barring that, he also doesn't have a whole lot of information on Giran either. What little exposition he's able to give is based on what he's heard other fighters say about him. He didn't even notice Giran himself during the preliminaries. So clearly, while Yamcha is knowledgeable about a lot of people, he clearly doesn't know everything, so it's not nearly as much of a red flag that he doesn't know who Jackie Chun is either. So here's an interesting thing you might not have picked up on. Yamcha actually mentions that he can't sense his fighting energy. This implies that he normally can sense someone's fighting energy, considering that sensing energy from people is going to be a major power that the protagonists of the series all share and use against their enemies later in the series. The fact that Yamcha suddenly has this power and his inability to sense it from Jackie Chun is actually alarming to him is kind of weird this early on in the series. For that matter, how exactly is Jackie Chun able to hide his fighting energy from Yamcha? The androids are able to hide their energy from the Z fighters because they were specifically built by Dr. Gero to account for that power. But here, we're learning for the first time that Yamcha even has the ability to sense fighting energy at all, so where did Jackie Chun get the ability to suppress it? Anyway, when Yamcha goes on the offensive, Jackie Chun dodges every strike. He even uses the same lazy dodging animation that is later used in Dragon Ball Z, used by the likes of Raditz and Frieza. And this is the first instance of that dodging animation being used. Yamcha uses this Wolfang Fist to no avail, the first time where that move proves to be entirely ineffective. Then Jackie Chun simply swipes his hand and blows Yamcha out of the ring. After the match, Yamcha almost recognizes Jackie Chun, only for Jackie to run off before Yamcha can piece it together. Yamcha asks where Master Roshi is, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo explains that Goku smelled him in the crowd earlier. Meanwhile, Jackie Chun realizes how serious Nam is, so he decides to read his mind and learn of his backstory. Okay, first of all, that's a huge invasion of privacy. How has nobody called that out before? Second, Nam's backstory is meant to elicit sympathy from the audience, but frankly, I feel like we just don't have enough information to know whether his plight is truly sympathetic or not. Supposedly, his village is dying of thirst, and they need the prize money to buy water to keep them from dying. However, there are a few details that are sprinkled in to make me think they should have way more options than they supposedly have. For starters, they supposedly live close enough to a city where they could buy water that actually traveling to that city isn't a problem for them. In another one of Nam's flashbacks, his other villagers have gathered up all their valuables so he could sell them in the city to pay for his trip to the World Martial Arts Tournament, implying that while that trip may cost money, actually traveling to the nearby city doesn't. So if the city is that close, why don't they all just go there to get jobs? I mean, sure, it may suck having to uproot your life like that, but what's the alternative for you? Is getting jobs in the city really so off the table for you that literally dying of thirst is the only other option for you if Nam doesn't win this tournament? Just how close is this city? Because depending on how close it is, you wouldn't even need to abandon your homes to get jobs there. Plenty of people outside the city limits go to work inside the city limits in the real world. I'm sorry, but I need a lot more details before I truly believe their situation is as hopeless as this show would have me believe. Ultimately, Nam's plight just serves to highlight Toriyama's lack of experience in telling serious stories. This is the sort of dilemma that could serve as the A-plot to an entire story in its own right. With Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, his desire to beat his bullies was ripped whole cloth from the Karate Kid, so Toriyama didn't even have to decide how to resolve the dilemma. The story was practically already written for him. But this is actually an attempt at an original character dilemma, and because Toriyama sucks at character development at this stage in the series, that lack of experience really shows here. Not only is this dilemma relegated to a side character, but it's not even fully fleshed out to the point where we can truly appreciate the sheer hopelessness of Nam's situation. So that's enough of that for now. It's time for match 3, Nam versus Ran Fan. As I said before, Ran Fan is a gimmick fighter. Her gimmick is playing into female gender stereotypes, and unlike Bacterian, who has a whole range of things he could do with his gimmick, Ran Fan only has 2, pretending to be helpless and taking off her clothes. The first one, however, is entirely on Nam for falling for it. After all, if she couldn't fight, how did she make it this far? Remember that Whiskers the Wonder Baldo said that some people train their whole lives just to make it past the preliminaries of this tournament, so the fact that she made it past the preliminaries should show us that she actually has some skill. Either that, or literally every single one of her preliminary opponents fell for her ruse hook, line, and sinker, even though everyone, at least in her preliminary bracket, must have been watching her preliminary matches. You'd think, at best, her shenanigans would have gotten her through the first round of preliminary fights before the other preliminary fighters realized she was faking it. Either that, or, like Bacterian, this woman didn't exist in universe until Toriyama decided to write her into it, without any regards to whether it was consistent with characters' past actions. 2 tournaments from now, when another woman is fighting her way through the preliminaries, the protagonists absolutely notice her kicking ass.
What skill? I think she's stronger than Launch.
Just saying. So when Nam realizes that she's just going to trick him, he decides he isn't going to fall for it a second time. She tries to attack only to get consistently blocked, so she resorts to the second and final trope that Toriyama can think of to play into this gimmick: sex. She strips down to her bra and panties and forces Nam to be unable to even look at her. However, Nam displays his own skill when he realizes he can easily fight her without his eyes. In the previous match, Yamcha mentioned something about sensing Jackie Chun's fighting energy, and here it's demonstrated that said sensing can be used to fight blind, which will become a common and frequent technique later in the series. And so, with Ranfan's gimmick having run its course, Nam defeats her as easily as any other preliminary opponent. Next! So the announcer summons Goku and Giran for the next match. However, just as they're about to fight, it begins to rain and the match is postponed. Up until now, the title cards have been fairly simple, a background relevant to the episode with the title appearing in plain white text, and a quick little jingle of the show's main theme playing. However, starting with episode 22, and for the next 2 tournament sagas, the anime adds in an extra animation to the title cards, having the Japanese symbol for the World Martial Arts Tournament appear 1 pen stroke at a time, and we get a really 80s synthetic sound effect as it slowly zooms out before giving us the traditional title card music. I have to admit that it definitely gives the 3 different tournament sagas in OG Dragon Ball their own unique identity. However, I do believe the show could have done without it, as evidenced by the fact that none of the other sagas in OG, Z, or GT ever have different title cards, and they all still feel unique. It's not bad, it's just not really necessary. So the protagonists head to a local piano bar to wait out the storm. Now here's a part where I definitely disagree with the masses. A lot of people seem to think that Giran is just a bad guy, and frankly I just don't see it. Yamcha is building up Giran as an opponent that Goku needs to watch out for. He claims that he's heard other people from the preliminaries say that he cheats in his matches, but frankly I'm not sure about that. To fast forward a bit, when Goku's match with Giran actually gets underway, Goku uses the flying Nimbus to avoid a loss by ring out. Giran naturally objects to the use of that cloud and says that Goku should be disqualified. He then argues that his merry-go-round gum is from inside his body, so it doesn't qualify as an outside tool. As the monk in the preliminaries explained,
"And no weapons either. Claws may be used, but only if they're natural."
Giran's merry-go-round gum seems like it would fall in the same category as natural claws. So when Yamcha says that Giran cheated in the preliminaries, how do we know it wasn't simply a case of him arguing a similar technicality on the rules, and the referee simply sided with him, and his opponent, being a sore loser, just said he cheated when really he just found a loophole? Bear in mind that even Yamcha isn't purporting to base his claims off of anything he directly saw during the preliminaries, only what he's heard other people say about Giran. We certainly don't see him outright cheat during his match with Goku. The anime tries to make him look like a bully by inserting a filler scene where he gets mad at Goku for trying to share the food with Nam. However, a moment ago, he clearly saw Goku sit down opposite the table from him and start chowing down, and clearly didn't give a fuck. So clearly Giran is willing to share his food. If Nam wants some, he can come get some. Giran only got mad at Goku because he took the plate away. Yeah, I don't blame him for getting pissed off at that. Even in the very scene where Yamcha says this, Giran gets harassed by the bully Wonder Baldos from earlier and a fight ensues. Remember that these Wonder Baldos were unequivocally bullies, so if Giran is fighting them, that makes him the good guy by proxy. Now sure, he also starts a fight with Yamcha, but it's only because of his apparent rash. In the Japanese version, this rash was supposedly caused by being next to Goody Goods, but in the Funimation dub he explains that it's caused by him being near false heroes, or pretenders. And yeah, that actually tracks with Yamcha's past. Remember that Yamcha was originally a ruthless bandit. He's only following the social contract now because he's living with Bulma in the city. So he definitely qualifies as a fake hero. So Giran isn't made a bad guy just because he picks a fight with Yamcha. And as if all of that weren't enough, let's also not forget his actions in episode 29, which I'm including as part of this saga even though the official Funimation release considers it the first episode of the next saga, because although Goku sets out on his next journey in that episode, narratively speaking it has far more to do with exploring the fallout of the tournament than it does with setting up the next main villains. Anyway, in that episode, Giran tells his tribe to fuck off because he respects Goku for defeating him in the tournament. He also explains that he actually wants to help Nam's village out by dismantling the dam that's blocking the river from reaching the village, but he literally can't because he doesn't have the ability to break the dam. When Goku breaks the dam for him, Giran is all smiles, genuinely happy that Nam's village can have water again. So, does anyone want to explain to me how the hell Giran is somehow a bad guy in all of this? Hashtag justice for Giran! So anyway, the rain subsides, Goku goes missing, they find him and the match recommences. So we get the first of Giran's unethical but not illegal tactics when he offers to show Goku something only to smack him into the wall. Frankly, even in this exchange where Giran comes the absolute closest to being a bad guy, I still have to side with him. Goku was warned in advance that Giran, at a minimum, will use dirty tactics, so just like Nam falling for Ranfan's helpless woman charade, I feel like it's at least partially Goku's fault for falling for it, and bear in mind, this is the only thing Giran ever does that isn't 100% fair, and even then, it's only really an unethical tactic, not really cheating. So Giran's attack is that he's a monster. So when Goku throws him out of the ring, he just uses his wings to return to the ring. This sets the precedent that in order to score a ring out, you have to actually touch the ground outside the ring in order to get a ring out. However, later in Z, Goku's son Goten will get knocked into the audience stands rather than the ground, and that's still declared a ring out. However, the important thing is that Giran never touched anything solid outside the ring, so he's still in. So Toriyama then moves on to the next thing he can think of to advance Giran's monster gimmick. He shoots some substance out of his mouth and ties Goku up in it. He calls it merry-go-round gum and says that it's impossible to break free from, as the harder you resist it, the tighter it squeezes. So with Goku now helpless, Giran throws him out of the ring. However, Goku simply calls the flying Nimbus to avoid landing outside the ring. Giran naturally protests Goku using an outside tool to get an unfair advantage, and this is yet another instance where I have to give Funimation credit for changing the dialogue in a way that makes the story better. In both the Japanese and English versions of this show, Goku was allowed to use it only once, but wasn't allowed to use it a second time. However, the reason why was way better in the dub. In the Japanese version, Toriyama simply wrote the referee as only allowing it because it looked cool.
Amazingly though, the head priest decides to allow it only once, but states that Goku will be disqualified if he does it again. This might explain why we never see this guy again. What referee in his right mind would call that fair just because the object used to break the rules is so cool?
The judges declared that the cloud was part of the natural setting of the arena since his feet never touched the ground.
In other words, because the flying Nimbus was a cloud, it doesn't count as a ring out any more so than if the fighters were to actually fight each other in the clouds. The flying Nimbus saving Goku from a ring out was fundamentally no different than if a sudden, incredibly lucky gust of wind happened to blow Goku back into the ring. However, what made this different was the fact that Goku had control over the cloud. This complicated matters in a way that the rules had not previously accounted for, and that's why there was a grace period, because the rules were not previously clear. But they were clear now, and that's why there was no grace period. So yeah, score 1 for the Funimation dub. Then again, I'm just a filthy dub tard, so what the hell do I know? Anyway, everyone realizes that Giran only needs to throw Goku out once more to win, but as soon as he throws Goku out a second time, Goku manages to hang on by his tail, which just happens to have grown back right at that moment. How incredibly plot convenient! Yamcha is understandably terrified by seeing Goku's tail regrown, and for good reasons, but strangely enough, both Jackie Chun and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo are also afraid, even though they don't know what Yamcha knows. Goku manages to break free of the merry-go-round gum, and he explains that he feels stronger with his tail. He's so strong, in fact, that he's able to break through the solid cement brick wall with his bare feet, which is nothing compared to the feats of strength the main characters will perform in adulthood, but at this point of the series, it's enough to make Giran throw in the towel against Goku. With the quarterfinals complete, the announcer decides to entertain the audience for a bit by interviewing Goku and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, seeing as they are wearing identical uniforms and made it all the way to the semifinals despite being extremely young. When Whiskers the Wonder Baldo explains that they were trained by Master Roshi, everyone suddenly understands how the boys performed so well. However, Jackie Chun is offended by the announcer calling Master Roshi old. Right after the Nam-Ranfan fight, Yamcha had surmised that Jackie Chun must be Master Roshi in disguise, and so Yamcha confronts him with the accusation, only for Jackie to deny it. During the interview, Goku explains that he's 12 years old. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is surprised because Goku apparently told him off-screen that he was 14 years old. But apparently that hour each day they spent having a conventional education did him some good and he learned how to count. However, Bulma is also shocked to hear that Goku is only 12. This is because in the previous saga, in the Japanese version, Goku actually told Bulma that he was 14 during the scene where he walks in on Bulma taking a bath. Since that was removed from the English version, Bulma's surprise at learning Goku's true age feels a bit out of place. I won't count that as a win for the original Japanese anime though, because this doesn't make the story better or worse. So the subject then turns to Goku's tail. He insists that it's real, and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo reaffirms what I said in the last saga, that having a tail is actually an ultra-rare trait in this world, which is filled to the brim with all kinds of fantastical stuff. Maybe he's not actually from this world, ever thought of that? So, with the interview finished, Jackie Chun demands that he be interviewed too. He then proceeds to do a song and dance number that ends up making a total ass out of him, but it does give Goku an excuse to be a goofball as well. So now it's time for Match 5, Jackie Chun vs. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo. This match highlights the upping of the ante you'd expect to come from the semifinals, because unlike when he fought Yamcha, this time Jackie has to actually try to dodge Whiskers the Wonder Baldo's attacks. The fight goes on for a little while, and eventually they charge at each other, a flash of light shows up for a split second, and then Whiskers the Wonder Baldo passes out. When he gets up before the count of 10, the announcer actually puts the match on hold and asks the fighters to reenact what just happened. This is by far the most interesting part of the entire match, as they reenact a crazy sequence of events, including Jackie Chun's spit and rock, paper, scissors. All of this, including the conversation they had while doing this, all happened in the span of a split second from the audience's point of view. This is both the most entertaining part of the entire match, and also the most unnecessary. It's one of the many things about OG Dragon Ball that makes more sense if we assume that OG is a prequel to Z. In that show, characters would frequently fight so fast that it was impossible to keep up unless you were equally superpowered. You're honestly telling me the characters are already at that level in this tournament, even though in the previous match, it was considered incredible that Goku was able to simply kick a hole in a brick wall? So after that reenactment is complete, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo decides to use trickery to defeat Jackie Chun. So he pulls out a pair of women's underwear that he just happens to have on hand, and Jackie Chun actually commits a cardinal sin in the martial arts world by letting down his guard. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo then kicks him far out of the ring, and the only way for Jackie Chun to be able to return to the ring is to use the Kamehameha wave to propel himself like a rocket. From Yamcha's point of view, this only further confirms that Jackie Chun is in fact Master Roshi. So, Whiskers the Wonder Baldo is now out of ideas, so he decides to just attack wildly. Needless to say, Jackie Chun ends up defeating him effortlessly, and he uses a technique called the After Image technique. This is the first time it's shown, and it'll be a repeat technique in this saga and the next one before being phased out. I always liked this technique because it's the sort of thing that could theoretically be replicated, at least to some extent, in the real world, since it merely requires moving faster than the eye can see. It's kind of like moving your hand back and forth in front of your face and seeing an after image of your hand. But the speed at which these characters move their entire bodies is impossible for anyone in the real world to do. It's a shame it only lasts for 2 sagas before never being seen again. In any event, Jackie Chun does a double chop to the neck, knocking Whiskers the Wonder Baldo out for the win. So Goku is confronting Whiskers the Wonder Baldo over his loss, and Yamcha once again accuses Jackie Chun of simply being Master Roshi in disguise. He attempts to rip off the wig, only to find it won't budge. To get to the bottom of this, Goku sniffs him and confirms that he doesn't have Master Roshi's scent. Remember earlier that Goku was able to detect Master Roshi's scent somewhere in the crowd, a full 180 degrees away from where Jackie Chun was standing at the moment. Let's also remember that Goku's sense of smell is so reliable that he was able to identify his scent on a random rock that Master Roshi had only held in his hand for a few seconds. So the fact that Goku states that Jackie Chun's scent is different from Master Roshi's, and that Roshi's scent was indeed out there in the crowd, should definitively put the kibosh on Jackie Chun being Master Roshi. It's either that or Goku's sense of smell isn't nearly as reliable as Toriyama would have you believe. Either that or Toriyama is a fucking idiot, and that last one is the least likely option of them all. Well, that's enough of that for now. Time for match 6, Goku vs. Nam. Goku tries an attack he calls Tornado, where Nam is unable to even attack him because he's spinning around so fast. Nam is an inch away from falling outside the ring, but just as he's about to be knocked out, Goku passes out from the dizziness. What a moron. Nam somehow realizes that Goku is far too skilled for him to beat on his own, so he has to resort to his signature attack, which he calls the aerial attack, because apparently Nam has no fucking imagination. He jumps about 10 stories in the air, a feat that Goku and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo were only able to do after 8 months of Master Roshi's world-famous training, and he, I'm not exactly sure what he does. I think it's supposed to be a double chop to the throat, but Nam never actually uncrosses his arms. So really, it looks like his forearms are just forcibly lodged into the corners of Goku's neck. Is that a legitimate place to target? Someone who actually practices martial arts for real, post in the comments how viable that is. Anyway, Nam monologues to himself that Goku will regain consciousness in approximately 8 to 10 days. However, just as the announcer is about to count to 10, Goku leaps up to his feet. No. Bad Toriyama. That should have been a win. I don't mean it was narratively appropriate for Nam to win at this moment. I mean, even in universe, the announcer should have gotten to 10 before Goku actually made it to his feet. He begins to say the te part of 10 right as Goku lifts his legs up. He only needed to pronounce one additional letter, but then he just stops. We saw from earlier in the Jackie Chun Whiskers the Wonder Baldo fight that the count continues even as the prone fighter is in the process of getting up. He has to actually get to both feet in order to break the 10 count. So therefore the announcer should have continued the count even while Goku's legs were up, because he hadn't yet gotten all the way to his feet. Had he continued the count like he should have, Goku might have been 3/4 the way towards standing, but he wouldn't have actually stood by the time the count was finished, so he should have lost. And before anyone asks, I actually checked the Japanese version of this scene, and the announcer commits the same sin there too. I was prepared to give Toy an extremely rare W if that were the case, but it's not. I checked. Strangely enough, however, the announcer in the Japanese anime actually counts to 10 in English, even though they say everything else in Japanese, and even though the Japanese language does indeed have its own words for the first 10 numbers. Don't ask me how that works. So Nam is now panicking because his strongest attack didn't work. He assumes he must have miscalculated, so he tries the aerial attack again, but Goku just jumps up after him, resulting in the series' first airborne fight. Again, this really feels like it's meant to be a prequel to Dragon Ball Z, and they're just throwing in the occasional fan service to that show, since airborne fights were commonplace in that show. Goku lands before Nam does, catches Nam on the way down, and kicks Nam out of bounds. Nam is gracious about his defeat, but he's still devastated, thinking that his village is now doomed. Like I said earlier, I just don't buy that his predicament is as hopeless as the show makes it sound, since it's unclear why they can't just move to the city where Nam sold off the last of their valuables to pay for his trip to the tournament and just get jobs there. So Jackie-chan notices that Nam is packing up to leave. He gets Nam's attention and throws him a dino cap, claiming that it contains a vat which he can use to fill up with water to take back to his village, explaining that he knew Nam needed water because he read his mind. Nam realizes that if Jackie can do that, he must be Master Roshi after all. So, Master Roshi is the only person in the whole world who can read minds? I'm pretty sure that's gonna be retconned only a few days from now in universe. And even if you don't count him, because how would Nam even know about him? Even then, in the next tournament, an entire trio of people who are telepathic will be introduced, and that school is indeed in the public eye. So it turns out that Jackie-chan is actually Master Roshi all along. Frankly, the disguise sucks. At least it has the advantage over the Clark Kent Superman disguise in that he's removing his sunglasses rather than Clark Kent removing his transparent eyeglasses. In addition to that, he also dons a glued-on wig, whereas Superman doesn't. So yes, it's not Superman levels of patheticness, but it's still pretty bad. He really should have worn a mask. It also maybe took a few voice acting lessons to make his voice sound different than before. Of course, that might have gotten in the way of him spraying himself with orange-scented perfume, but the only reason he needed to do that was to get around Goku's sense of smell. But that just begs the question, how did he even know about Goku's sense of smell? The only time before the tournament that was ever established was when Goku found the rock, and even then he believed Whiskers the Wonder Baldo was the one to find it, and Goku kept his word not to squeal to Master Roshi. So how would he even know that was a thing he needed to account for? Besides, as I explained earlier, Goku was still able to smell Master Roshi in the crowd, even though he was actually found in the opposite direction. So overall, Toriyama handled Goku's sense of smell in this saga pretty sloppy, and the whole disguise ruse would have been way more convincing if he had just foregone the smell thing entirely while giving Roshi a mask and voice acting lessons. Oh, but then how would Goku have found the rock? Yeah, Toriyama can keep that part and just never bring it up again. He brings up so many other things one time each and then immediately forgets about them, so why not this? I hardly doubt anyone would immediately notice that Goku should have the ability to sniff Roshi out if the show hadn't directly called attention to it. So that just begs the question, why? Why dared Roshi feel the need to deceive his own students like this? Well, the reason he gives is because he fears that if they win the tournament on their first attempt, they'll probably believe they're the best and give up training. He wants them to keep that fire in their bellies, so he wants them to know there's always someone stronger. So that, in turn, raises the question, how true is Master Roshi's fears? Would the boys really have stopped training if they both came in first and second place in the tournament on their first try? I highly doubt it. Sure, there's a guy way later in the series who doesn't feel like he needs to train for the tournament because his victory is a foregone conclusion, but the implication there is that it's only because he is an egotistical blowhard, not the sort of thing that is inherent to martial artists who've won the tournament. To help give a point of comparison, let's compare the Asian genre of wuxia to something that we actually have in both the USA and Japan, professional wrestling. When a wrestler becomes world champion, does he ever start to feel like King Louie from the Jungle Book, where he feels like I've reached the top and had to stop, and that's what's bothering me? Quite the contrary. Rather, once you finally become world champion, that's when the real grind truly begins. For example, Bryan Danielson, who wrestled in WWE under the ring name Daniel Bryan, won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 30 in 2014. But he often tells that his personal favorite WrestleMania moment actually occurred 5 years later when he dropped the title to Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania 35 in 2019. His reason for preferring that moment is because that was the moment he could forgo all the sponsorships and interviews and being the face of the company and instead just go back to wrestling. Only wrestling and absolutely nothing else. Of course, that's only a behind-the-scenes reason, but even in kayfabe, once a person becomes world champion, that still isn't the end of his journey. All that means is that he goes from being the hunter to the hunted. You want to be champion? You trained your whole life for this moment where you hoist the title belt over your head while the crowd cheers for your accomplishment? Well, so has everyone else on the roster been training just as hard as you for that exact same moment. And just as you targeted the incumbent champion with the intention of beating him in a title fight, so too are all the other contenders on the roster now targeting you. Except, whereas before you only had to focus your training and attention on one incumbent champion, now you have to consider about a dozen potential challengers for your title if you want to hold on to it. So the idea that you can just rest on your laurels once you finally win the big one is absurd. Even in the context of Dragon Ball, there's little if any evidence that those who win the World Martial Arts Tournament suddenly lose their will to continue training. There's certainly no indication that Gohan ever started slacking off, not if the way Goku ultimately turned out under his parentage is any indication. Did Ox King ultimately slack off? Not if the way Goku was completely unable to damage him in the last saga is any indication. Even Yamcha and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, who ultimately do retire from martial arts, do so for the complete opposite reason that Master Roshi gives here. Rather than already being the best and having nothing left to shoot for, they ultimately realize that they'll never be able to measure up to the awesome power of the Super Saiyans. We see that in wrestling sometimes too, where wrestlers will get so frustrated with their repeated losing efforts that they'll agree to a title versus career stipulation where they'll retire if they lose again because they don't want to even be wrestlers if they can't be champion. So yeah, I would very much like to know exactly what specific life experiences Master Roshi ever had that led him to believe that plucky upstarts like these three needed to lose their tournament endeavors in order to keep them hungry. So that takes me to the tournament structure. Goku, the main protagonist, ends up facing the main antagonist in the finals. And yes, even though Master Roshi isn't a bad guy, he is still the main antagonist of this saga. To be an antagonist, a character need only be the primary source of obstructing the main character from achieving his goals. For example, in My Cousin Vinny, the prosecutor is the main antagonist, even though he's just doing his job. The bad guy is the real killer, but he never appears in the movie. But even though the prosecutor is just doing his job, he still technically counts as the main antagonist, because he's the primary obstacle standing in between the main protagonist and their goal of clearing their names. Along that same vein, I wholly disagree with Master Roshi's reasoning for why he needs to deceive his students, but that aside, I still concede that he sincerely believes his own logic and is acting in good faith, even if I believe he is tragically misguided. Besides, foiling the boy's aspirations for victory isn't nearly as heinous of an act as, say, Baby from Dragon Ball GT, who has a sympathetic motive but becomes downright genocidal in pursuit of it, which is enough to make him a bad guy regardless of how sincere he is in his beliefs. Anyway, the main protagonist and main antagonist end up fighting in the finals, and frankly, I'm kind of annoyed that it worked out so perfectly. In the next tournament, a character with psychic powers is going to rig the drawings so that various characters will face each other in the quarterfinals, and it's only because his friend underestimates Goku that they end up on opposite sides of the bracket from each other. But here, it is by pure luck. Not just that the 8 quarterfinalists were also the top 8 fighters, but that those 8 fighters were paired up in a way that is the most narratively expedient. Let's start with the preliminaries. In universe, it is logistically just as likely that Jackie Chun would have ended up facing Goku in the first match of the preliminaries as it is that he would end up facing Goku in the finals. Just imagine how much Master Roshi's plan would have gone up in smoke if he and Goku fought to a 1-minute time limit draw and the referee declared Goku the winner by points. Later in the series, the preliminaries will be replaced with a punching machine, and while a lot of people have a lot of perfectly valid criticisms at that, one advantage it has over the current system is that it ensures that only the top 15 performances make it to the main tournament, without risking the best matchups being wasted in a preliminary round with no audience just because that's how the random drawings went. Then there's the contrived setup for the main tournament. It just bugs me that, by sheer luck of the draw, the quarterfinals end up being drawn in a way that best facilitates Master Roshi's goals. In the Cell Games saga, it's expected that Goku vs. Cell will be the main event, and that ends up being the first match after Mr. Satan and his pupils. It ends up not being the main event though, but only because Goku shocks everyone by passing the torch to his son. At least in the next tournament, there's an in-universe explanation for why the quarterfinals are set up so perfectly, as I've already explained. Honestly, it's not a huge deal, but it does bug me just how much the convenient tournament structure stretches credulity. So anyway, Roshi explains to Nam that water is actually free in this city, so Nam can take as much water as he likes from the nearby well. Sorry, but I don't buy it. Even if we assume that moving to the nearby city and getting jobs there wasn't a viable option for the village, I still refuse to believe that this one tiny little well has enough water in the bottom to supply Nam's entire village for the next few months before the rainy season comes. Even if it had that much water, remember that Nam can only draw one bucketful at a time, so it would take days and days for him to actually draw enough to save his village. However, Nam appears satisfied with this solution, so I'll just leave it at that, since it's clear Toriyama didn't think about the logistics of this problem very deeply anyway. However, Roshi asks for something in return. He asks Nam to dress up as him so he can pretend to show Yamcha that Roshi actually is in the crowd. This somehow works even though Nam has a way darker tan than Roshi does, but frankly, if the boys are going to be fooled by the actual Jackie Chun disguise, that's small potatoes by comparison. So Yamcha becomes convinced that Roshi isn't actually Jackie Chun. The announcer then summons Goku and Jackie Chun for the final match. He plays to the crowd for a bit by interviewing the two finalists. He starts by asking Goku what his strategy is. Goku explains that he doesn't really have a strategy, that he just plans to do his best. Of course, even I don't know what Goku would actually say in such a scenario. However, he then tries to interview Jackie Chun. However, even though he previously was offended at not getting interviewed, now when the announcer actually wants to interview him, he's suddenly asleep. Oh, Toriyama, you hopelessly inconsistent motherfucker. Backstage, Yamcha tells Whiskers the Wonder Baldo that he believes Goku can beat Jackie Chun now that he's satisfied that he's not actually Master Roshi. Whiskers the Wonder Baldo, however, is still worried seeing as he beat the two of them easily. This honestly risks giving away the end of the match though, since we the audience now know that it is indeed Master Roshi. Since Yamcha's confidence was expressly predicated on him not being Master Roshi, that means that we the audience are expected to know that his confidence is misplaced. So the match begins, and Roshi immediately goes on the attack, a break from his previous two fights. Goku jumps out of the way, but Roshi just does a weird backflip and manages to kick Goku right in the spine, sending him flying. Some of you probably believe that this undermines what I suggested earlier, that if they fought each other in the preliminaries, it would likely go to a time limit draw. However, in the next tournament, Goku will bounce off the ceiling during the preliminaries, and that won't be considered a ring out. So the only way this kick would have instantly defeated Goku is if he actually went through the wall, like Whiskers the Wonder Baldo's first opponent. Roshi begins monologuing to himself about how he repeatedly told Goku not to let his guard down. Okay, first of all, you're one to talk, seeing as you almost lost your semifinals match because of that exact same sin. Second, I can only think of one time you actually told that to Goku, and that was a joke. When the mermaid smacked you upside the head, Goku declared that the lesson was to keep your guard up, and then you just rolled with it to try and save face. Did you actually teach the boys the importance of keeping your guard up any other time? If so, I'd really like to have seen that lesson. However, it turns out that Goku hasn't lost yet. Of course, we the audience know that Goku can fly back with the Kamehameha wave, so we haven't lost all hope yet, but I don't think anyone was prepared for what Goku actually did. In what is honestly one of the most original and creative moments in the entire saga, Goku is able to return to the ring not with the Kamehameha wave, but by spinning his tail like a helicopter. I have no idea how plausible that is in real life, seeing as he only has one propeller blade and the tail is a cylinder rather than the shape of a helicopter blade that's designed to actually put air underneath it to create lift. But it certainly stands out here. The Sonic character Tails will eventually go on to have this ability, but this manga chapter predates the advent of that character by about 7 years. When he lands, he explains what we, the audience, were already thinking, that he could have also flown back with the Kamehameha wave like Jackie Chun did. Roshi, however, isn't convinced. Instead, he insists that Goku can't even do the Kamehameha wave. Roshi, you know you've already seen him do it, right? And this is no minor lapse in memory either, seeing as it was witnessing that feat that inspired Roshi to offer to train Goku in the first place. It's unlikely that he's saying this as Jackie Chun either, since he immediately follows up by taking credit for inventing the move. However, this is one of the few times in the series where this is actually the Funimation dub's fault. In the manga, as well as the original toy version of the show, all Jackie ever says is that Goku can't do a Kamehameha wave as great as he can. In other words, the tiny little wave that Goku did at Fire Mountain in the last saga wasn't strong enough to propel Goku like a rocket the way Jackie Chun's wave could. So yeah, I have to give a rare point to Toy because one of Funimation's changes made the story worse. Don't get used to this though, because these points are going to be few and far between. So, in yet another moment that honestly feels like it's meant to foreshadow Dragon Ball Z and make this series work a lot better as a prequel to Z rather than it being the OG series, Jackie Chun and Goku each decide to match wave for wave, resulting in the series' first ever beam struggle. This feels like foreshadowing Z because it is actually the only beam struggle in the entirety of OG Dragon Ball. But once Z rolls around, it becomes quite commonplace. Anyway, they both get knocked back by each other's waves, but neither of them are knocked out of the ring. So Jackie pulls out another trick, the after image technique, much to Goku's chagrin, who points out that Jackie has done this move already. However, it turns out that this is actually a double after image, so Jackie is able to clock Goku good. However, Goku gets up at the count of 8 and then counters with a double after image of his own. Except now it's a triple after image. You know, I'm starting to see why this move was quickly phased out if the only way you can make it bigger and better is just by adding more and more copies of yourself. So then Jackie tries to use the drunken boxing fighting style, thinking Goku won't be able to counter it since he's never been drunk. Goku does counter it, however, since he recognizes it as one of his grandpa's old techniques, so he just whips out a fighting style he developed specifically to counter it, which he calls the Crazy Monkey style. So because that didn't work, Jackie decides to simply use hypnosis. Even the announcer disapproves of this technique since it's not actually martial arts, but it's not strictly against the rules either, so the announcer has no choice but to count. However, this is where Bulma makes her one and only contribution to the saga.
Oh, wait! Goku! Your dinner's ready! Dinner? Dinner? Where's dinner? I want dinner! Is there some left for me?
So next, Goku uses his Fist of the Rock, Paper, Scissors attack, but Jackie blocks every attack. Realizing that Jackie actually knows the style, he decides to trick his opponent by purposefully calling out Paper, but instead attacking with Rock. Unfortunately, Jackie-chan gets up at the count of 7. So now Roshi is getting desperate. If he's going to defeat Goku and keep his spirits up, he realizes he has to use the technique. This show really builds up what Roshi is about to do as being quite ominous. Even Roshi monologues to himself that he hopes it doesn't kill Goku. After explaining that he only used this attack once before against Goku's grandfather, Gohan, he then proceeds to spend a whopping 2 whole minutes charging up the attack. While this pales in comparison to charge times in Dragon Ball Z, this is the longest time spent charging an attack so far in the series, which helps build up just how powerful the attack truly is. He calls out the name Lightning Flash Surprise, and suddenly Goku is engulfed in electricity and is crying out in pain. Yamcha exposits that this move is basically like a taser gun, attacking the target with 20,000 volts of electricity, except whereas a taser shot usually only lasts about 5 seconds, this attack lasts for as long as Jackie-chan keeps it going. Jackie demands that Goku give up, pointing out that the attack will kill Goku if he stays in it too long. Goku doesn't want to give up, but as the attack drags on, his friends keep begging him to finally surrender, and eventually Goku agrees. But before he manages to fully say that he gives up, he catches a glimpse of the full moon and transforms again into a giant ape, breaking free of the attack. So, Goku's Great Ape transformation, or at least the second one we get to see. Frankly, I find this transformation to be even more superfluous than the last one. At least with the last one, its necessity was the result of Toriyama making up the story as he went along. Because he never thought more than a couple of pages ahead, he ends up putting the heroes in an impossible death trap without thinking about how he was going to get them out of it. So he pulled a never-before-hinted-at transformation out of his ass to make up for his lack of forethought. Here, Toriyama does the opposite. Goku's tail grows back during the quarterfinals, so that actually sets up well in advance that he's going to transform. But this time, he pencils in a new, never-before-hinted-at fighting technique in order to create an impossible trap that only the Great Ape transformation can get him out of. But we don't need an impossible trap. If you wanted to have Goku transform, just have him transform. All he needs is a quick glimpse at the full moon. Just imagine if both the tail regrowing and the lightning flash surprise were both removed from the story. Would we have lost anything? See, the reason why this happened in the first place was because Toriyama just wanted to bring back Goku's tail, since that was an iconic part of Kid Goku's appearance, and also because it connects him to his alien heritage. So he instead opts to get rid of the moon to keep Goku from transforming again. However, this effectively means that the transformation is even more superfluous than it was in the last saga. Whereas the Pilaf Saga transformation was thematically irrelevant to the rest of the story, but narratively necessary because they were in an otherwise impossible death trap, here it is both thematically and narratively irrelevant. Not only does it carry no real thematic significance, unlike the Super Saiyan transformation, but it was also narratively irrelevant. Like I said, you could go straight from the rock, paper, scissors attack straight into the post-transformation section of the fight with virtually nothing feeling out of place. The only other thing, aside from Toriyama giving himself a do-over on the tail, that the Grade 8 transformation contributes to this fight is giving a reason for Roshi to have to exhaust all of his ki energy. However, there's no reason why it couldn't have simply been another Kamehameha beam struggle that led to that. As if that weren't enough, the way people react to this transformation just feels inorganic as well. The audience runs away, which makes sense. Goku's friends all stick around, which also makes sense. But the announcer explains that he has to stay and be referee, and Jackie Chun points out that he can't run outside the ring or he'll be disqualified. So the match is still ongoing? After this transformation, the fight will be put into recess just so Goku can put on some clothes. Hell, earlier in this tournament, Goku's quarterfinals match was put into recess just because of a fucking rainstorm. But a 10-story monster who is literally destroying the entire stadium with his bare hands and putting innocent bystanders at risk isn't worth suspending the match over? Where's the consistency in any of this? So yeah, all in all, this transformation is a big ol' letdown for those who watched Dragon Ball Z first and know just how compelling the transformation can be when it's actually used right and done in a way that is both narratively and thematically significant. However, there is at least one good thing about this sequence, but only one. While Yamcha has a plan to return Goku to normal by cutting off his tail again, Master Roshi, who wasn't present the first time Goku transformed, comes up with his own plan to stop Goku. He fires up his full power Kamehameha wave. Yamcha thinks that Jackie is planning on killing Goku in order to stop him, and he tries to warn Jackie that this isn't necessary. Christopher Sabat, the voice actor for Yamcha, absolutely knocks it out of the park and into outer space with his delivery in this sequence, conveying Yamcha's panic as he attempts to warn Jackie before the blast gets fired.
Wait, Jackie!
When Jackie actually fires his blast, there's a shot of the Great Ape surrounded by nothing but white light. The implication is that Goku was engulfed by the blast. When the dust settles and Goku is nowhere to be seen, Yamcha laments that he wasn't able to get to Jackie in time. Bulma begins to weep, and Yamcha holds her, showing what a good boyfriend he is. The episode ends on a somber note, with Goku presumed dead. Of course, we in the USA who saw Dragon Ball Z first know that he isn't dead, because he dies during the fight against Raditz and gets wished back with the Dragon Balls. And we also know that the Dragon Balls can't revive a person more than once. For the past 2 episodes, I've been mentioning how a lot of OG Dragon Ball works a lot better if the show were actually a prequel to Dragon Ball Z, but this is one of the few moments that only works if it's not a prequel. It's only if the audience doesn't know the future of the series that this whole Goku is presumed dead cliffhanger actually works. So at the start of episode 28, the announcer declares that Jackie Chun is the winner, even though killing your opponent is supposed to be strictly forbidden. What, was that rule set aside this one time but you couldn't be bothered to call off the match due to the emergency? However, Roshi points out that he didn't actually kill Goku, that Goku is actually sleeping amongst the rubble. Instead, he directed his Kamehameha wave against the moon, which is now completely gone. Apparently, the moon is unnecessary in this universe since the Earth doesn't experience any cataclysms for the rest of the series, at least not as a result of the moon being gone. So Jackie demands a 10 count, but Goku actually wakes up at the count of 2. Jackie is mad that the announcer didn't start counting sooner, but to be fair, last time Goku D8'd, he slept through the entire night, so frankly it shouldn't have mattered. Anyway, Goku is now naked, and only now does the announcer suddenly decide to suspend the match. Anyway, when the match resumes, Roshi tries to fire a Kamehameha wave only to let out a tiny spark. Turns out he wasted all his energy destroying the moon. Goku seizes on the opportunity and fires his own Kamehameha, forcing Jackie to jump to dodge it. Goku leaps into the air after him and kicks him out of the ring. It looks as if this match is going to end in the opposite of how it began, and this time Jackie can't even use the Kamehameha wave to fly back. However, Jackie has managed to just barely avoid touching down outside the ring, so he's still in. So Jackie now declares that even Goku can't fire any more energy attacks. How the fuck do you know that? And so they agree to duke it out with nothing but conventional hand-to-hand combat. The fight continues for an indeterminate amount of time, with the announcer claiming that they've been fighting for 4 whole hours. During this section of the fight, we got the first ever insert of the Tenkaichi Budokai song. This is the main theme song for the tournament saga, and since there's no point in me discussing the show's main themes again, this will be my only chance this saga to discuss the score, so I'd better make use of this opportunity while it lasts. It's a decent song, but it makes references to this specific tournament even though it continues to play in other tournaments where these references don't apply. For example, in the beginning of the second verse, the song has a lyric that, from my English point of view, sounds like which translates into English as Goku is flying with the aid of his tail. That happens in this tournament, but only in this one tournament, and it never happens again for the rest of the series. However, this exact line is played during the preliminaries of the next tournament as the show skims over the preliminary matches. Another weird thing about this song is that it mostly doesn't rhyme. Now, I understand that in Japanese, songs don't need to rhyme. It's a cultural thing, and unlike the child nudity from the last saga, this time the cultural thing is entirely subjective. There's nothing wrong with music that doesn't rhyme if it's culturally appropriate. However, pay close attention to what I just said. I didn't say this song is weird because it doesn't rhyme. I said it's weird because it mostly doesn't rhyme. What's weird about this song is that it does in fact rhyme at exactly 1 point. And before anyone who doesn't speak Japanese tries to suggest that this might be an incidental rhyme, it's not. I actually found an English translation for this song. Right after Nadoka, the line being sung, translated into English, means they are now ready to unleash the power within. Kamehameha. In other words, the Kamehameha line is tacked onto a complete and standalone sentence, and the only reason I can think of to include this superfluous word is so it can rhyme with Nadoka, even though rhyming isn't necessary in Japanese music. Weird. So Jackie Chun challenges Goku to a dual kick in the face, and Goku accepts the challenge. They kick each other, and neither are able to stand for a 10 count. Under normal circumstances, this match would be declared a draw, but the World Martial Arts Tournament must have a champion. The announcer receives confirmation from the Dog Monk from earlier that, in this rare event, it isn't just the first one to make it to his feet who wins, but rather the first one to make it to his feet and declare that he's the champion is the one who wins. In the original Japanese version, the winner also has to smile while he's saying it, but that's an entirely unnecessary rule. The Funimation dub cut that part out and nothing felt out of place. Sure, both characters were smiling during their respective speeches, but the implication there is that it's just Goku being Goku and Jackie Chun being happy that he's finally won. So Goku is the one who makes it to his feet first. He tries to say that he's the champion, but passes out again right before he finishes the final syllable. Jackie Chun then gets to his feet, appears to pass out before even beginning to speak, but that ends up being a fake out as he declares himself the world champion without stuttering. He then monologues to himself that the reason his plan worked is because his legs were longer, so he was able to dig deeper in that final kick and do more damage. So, how was it that Goku made it to his feet first? Obviously, the whole reason why the fighter needed to actually declare himself the champion in order to be declared the winner, rather than simply get to his feet first, is so we can have the moment where Goku actually gets to his feet first, yet still ends up losing. But even then, we could have just had Goku get all the way up to 1 foot and 1 knee, only to pass out again as he tries to straighten his back. We didn't need to add a bunch of additional requirements. As it stands, the additional requirements merely put the finish at odds with Roshi's explanation as to why his plan worked. So Goku wakes up and is really disappointed to hear that he lost the match, but he takes his loss with grace and asks Jackie for a rematch at the next tournament. He and Whiskers the Wonder Baldo meet up with Bulma and company, and an undisguised Master Roshi soon joins them, promising that, while they've earned a break from training for a little while, once they return, the real training is soon to begin. They celebrate the tournament with a fancy dinner. Goku eats 57 full-course meals. I'll assume that everyone else had 1 full-course meal each, so that comes out to 63 full-course meals total. The bill comes out to 470,000 zenny, ending the episode on a comedic note that Goku actually got to spend the prize money after all. That means that each meal cost approximately 7,460 zenny on average. Since a zenny has 1-to-1 conversion rate to real-life yen, that means that each meal cost approximately 47 American bucks. Adjusted for inflation, that comes out to approximately $140 in 1985, which, yeah, that tracks with the cost of a nice restaurant in Japan, so good on Toriyama for actually checking his math. The next day, Goku decides he's going to set off to recover his grandpa's 4-star Dragon Ball, but before he can do so, he encounters Nam and decides to help him out. As I said earlier, this episode has far more to do with exploring the fallout of the tournament saga than it has to do with setting up the next one, so I'll include my discussion of the episode here. Nam and the village elder are discussing what they should do if the water Nam got doesn't sustain them. It turns out that there used to be a river in their village, but that it's dried up for the first time in their lifetimes. The elder is hopeful that the wandering lake will come and save them, telling a story that his own grandfather told him, but which apparently happened so long ago that nobody alive in the village today has any direct memories of it. So Goku meets up with Nam and helps him find the source of the river. It turns out that some members of Giran's species have built a dam so they can hog all the water for themselves. Giran himself shows up and explains that the dam was built long before any of them were born. So how is it that the river only just now dried up? But more importantly, Giran can't break the dam even if he wanted to, since it's made out of merry-go-round gum. Of course, Goku has already demonstrated that he can overcome that stuff, so he volunteers to break the dam for them. As I mentioned earlier, Giran is delighted that Goku succeeded and that Nam's village can now have water. So yeah, Giran is a nice guy, #Justice for Giran. However, just as Nam's village is about to rejoice, a giant sandstorm comes up and engulfs the village and its river. With the limited amount of water Nam brought back being almost gone, and the river now having been destroyed by the sandstorm, all hope seems lost. But then, on the horizon, the village spots what the elder mentioned earlier, the roaming lake, which apparently has come to sustain them long enough until either the rainy season comes or the river is able to flow again, whichever occurs first. Not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of this ending. Roshi's and Goku's efforts to help Nam out were generous and demonstrated great strength of character for both of them, but all of that was undone by the sandstorm. But then, the undoing was itself suddenly undone by a lake appearing out of nowhere. It's a deus ex machina, a plot device in which a seemingly unsolvable problem in a story is suddenly or abruptly resolved by an unexpected and unlikely occurrence. It is often criticized as inartistic, too convenient, and overly simplistic because it tends to rob the protagonists of their agency. People like it when the stories they follow are resolved through the cunning, resourcefulness, and skill of the protagonists. Roshi telling Nam that water is free in that city, and Goku breaking the dam are both examples of that, and had Nam's story ended with either of them, like it does in the manga where we never see him again after he leaves the tournament, it would have been fine. But due to the sandstorm, neither of those actually end up solving Nam's problem. But then, out of nowhere, the plot itself decides, okay Nam, you suffered enough, here's a solution to your problem handed to you on a silver platter. It's just disappointing. The Tournament Saga. To be fair, this saga mostly exists in the first place just to kill time until the next saga. The Dragon Balls, which the series is literally named after, have nothing at all to do with this saga. Even the Cell and Majin Buu sagas utilize the Dragon Balls more than the Tournament sagas do, as they at least use the Dragon Balls at the very end to revive all the people killed by the villains. The Tournament sagas don't even have that much, so it seems out of place that these sagas even exist in a series called Dragon Ball. During Dr. Slump, the Tournament sagas in that series were the most popular, which is how Toriyama got the inspiration to do a Tournament saga here. But at least then, the series' name didn't become a lie. The character named Dr. Slump still existed as a character in that series. If this series were called The Adventures of Goku or something like that, it might have worked. But it isn't called that, and so it doesn't work. However, one advantage this saga has over the Pilaf saga is that it has a much more defined structure. Whereas the Pilaf saga was just a bunch of disconnected episodic adventures, interconnected only insofar as the gang was looking for the Dragon Balls, this saga actually has a clear through line. It starts with Goku only wanting to train to become stronger for its own sake, but once the tournament gets introduced, the boys suddenly have a clear goal to work toward. The training will last 8 months. Their goal is to get as good as they possibly can in order to win the World Martial Arts Tournament, and once the tournament starts, it too has a clearly defined structure with preliminaries, quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the final match. However, this advantage it has over the Pilaf saga is undercut by the fact that because Toriyama has so little experience in telling stories that actually have narrative structure, he ends up making a lot of contrived story decisions that hurt the overall narrative. I've discussed a lot of them already, but here's another one. The protagonists have no real goal. Once the tournament starts, the boys are competing for the sake of competing, and aside from Nam, there's really nothing at stake. That alone isn't a problem. After all, I repeatedly compared the martial arts society in this series to professional wrestling, and all too often, those men are striving to be champion for its own sake. However, this also suffers from the combined fact that it's obvious that this is only meant to pad for time until the next Dragon Ball hunting saga. Not only that, but Toriyama subverts his own narrative purpose when he has Roshi put on a disguise to deceive his students. He has a reason for doing it, but as I already explained, it's not a very good reason, and we'll go the entire rest of the series without ever knowing exactly why he feels that way. And then there's the countless little things that strains credulity. The training strains credulity, the convenient way the preliminaries are allotted strains credulity, the way the quarterfinals are set up strains credulity, Nam's desperate plight lacks credulity, Bacterian's very existence strains credulity by dint of nobody noticing his odor during the preliminaries. These little things add up quickly. For all of these reasons, I rank the Tournament Saga below the Peel-Off Saga. I'm shocked that I'm doing this. When I finished the Peel-Off Saga, I fully expected to rank this saga higher, and I think I even alluded to that during the last episode, simply because it had more narrative structure. But as I actually examined this saga closely, the flaws became too egregious to ignore, even if any one of them might have gotten a pass from me by themselves. So that was my retrospective of the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament Saga. Next time, I'm going to get started on the Red Ribbon Army Saga, but I won't cover it in one go. This saga is so huge and broken up into standalone story arcs that I'll actually be covering each sub-saga one at a time. So next time, I'm going to cover the 3-episode-long Colonel Silver sub-saga. In the meantime, however, please like this video, post some comments, share it with your friends, consider supporting me as a channel member, and oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later.